starving millions and ultimately transform humanity into a race of hyper-intelligent superbeings. Brand new techniques enabling scientists and clinicians to manipulate and change the very genetic code of life itself are coming on stream fast, and the implications are awe-inspiring, if not a little frightening. So join us today as we peer down the microscope for a glimpse of just how gene editing can change the world. Back in 2018, a Chinese scientist called He Zhonghui made headlines around the world by announcing the birth of the first ever gene-edited babies. An associate professor and biophysics researcher, he claimed to have used the sophisticated new DNA editing technique known as CRISPR to manipulate a gene called CCR5 in a pair of twin girls, named Nana and Lulu. This CCR5 gene codes for a particular protein that allows HIV to infect human cells. By disabling this specific gene, he claimed to have genetically engineered Nana and Lulu to be resistant to HIV. His announcement was not in fact welcomed by the scientific community, who expressed outrage that his rash act marked the first step on a long-feared slippery slope towards so-called designer babies. At the very least, his announcement opened up a formidable ethical can of worms. Before we discuss why, let's examine what CRISPR actually is. CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats and is a family of DNA sequences commonly found in the genomes of bacteria. CRISPR acts as part of a bacteria's natural internal defense mechanism, its immune system if you will. It helpfully, for the bacteria anyway, identifies hostile viruses as they're invading and quite literally cuts their DNA to neutralize their threat. To be more precise still, CRISPR is actually a homing device that identifies which specific portion of hostile foreign material needs cutting. Then an enzyme known as Cas9 works alongside CRISPR as a tiny molecular scalpel, precisely snipping the hostile DNA strand and halting any danger in the process. In 2012, scientists led by Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuelle Charpentier announced to the world they'd identified a means of hacking this mechanism, using CRISPR-Cas9 to make ultra-specific edits to any given length of genetic code. Let's take a step back and see what all that means. Genomes are long strings of genetic instructions, recipes in effect, which serve as the instructions that make up all living things, from you to a shark to a banana. Genomes consist of just 4 letters, A, C, G, and T, arranged in lengthy strings. CRISPR allows scientists to edit those strings, altering the recipe at the level of individual letters, thus changing whatever life form ultimately emerges out on the other side. This manipulation can be as elementary as switching off certain genes, itself a useful and instructive exercise for helping scientists identify what any given gene actually does. But thanks to refinements in the CRISPR process, new stretches of genetic code can now also be inserted into the genome, as one might copy and paste quotations into a school essay using everyday word processing software. The implications of this, as you're probably already thinking, are extraordinary and unprecedented. Agriculture is one field especially ripe for genetic intervention. With a human population racing towards 10 billion against the backdrop of runaway climate change, isn't it prudent to explore ways of making food crops more robust? Why not create a new kind of wheat that delivers higher yields? Or fix that single stubborn letter of DNA which makes it susceptible to new parasites or fungus? Imagine cereal crops with lower levels of gluten, or nutritionally superfortified rice, or drought-resistant corn. And that's just crops. Researchers in China have already shown that CRISPR techniques can be used to make police dogs put on substantially more muscle than their natural counterparts.
Grammarly helps you work more efficiently, which makes accomplishing your work goals easier than ever before. Get full sentence rewrite suggestions.
Why not do that for goats, which feed hungry populations in the developing world? Some scientists reckon they'll soon be able to use CRISPR for manipulating a specific type of yeast that transforms sugars into hydrocarbons, which can in turn be used to make plastics. This would substantially reduce our reliance on oil, easing stress on the environment. Another more dystopian strand of research suggests that livestock, specifically pigs, could be used as living organ banks, growing hearts, kidneys, or even lungs for transplant patients on top of all that yummy bacon and ham. An American company called eGenesis is currently using CRISPR techniques to that very end, cleverly stamping out porcine retroviruses and other lethal nasties hiding out in the pig genome. In a country where 100,000 people are right now on the waiting list for new organs, with 20 dying from a lack of a good match each day, the need is urgent and the commercial potential obvious. Such medical applications are likely to loom large in the rise of CRISPR over the coming years. Scientists are optimistic that over the coming years, both academia and big money startups will start applying CRISPR to problems like hereditary blindness, heart disease, cystic fibrosis, and even some mental health problems. Even if it doesn't cure cancer overnight, CRISPR offers researchers a uniquely powerful tool with which they can explore the genome. It's relatively simple right now, say, for scientists to tag stretches of genetic code using fluorescent molecules that can track behavior and responsiveness to any given treatment. CRISPR is also remarkably simple and cheap to use, with hundreds of researchers all over the world already using what's been described as the ultimate in democratized biotech. The widespread, almost open source nature of CRISPR technology does have some drawbacks, however, not least the many ethical questions it poses. If we can, for instance, manipulate a human embryo to eliminate the gene for congenital hearing loss, should we? The tiny embryo obviously can't give consent to such a life-changing procedure, and deaf parents have frequently been known to prefer raising families within their own unique and special deaf culture. It's also difficult to know what any knock-on effects of messing with the very code of life might be. If a scientist makes an edit that subsequently copies and pastes itself down several generations, who is liable for any unforeseen consequences decades or centuries from now? What if hostile actors use CRISPR techniques to create a new, even more deadly global pandemic? Or manufacture horrific biological weapons? Or introduce potent invasive species that upend delicate ecosystems? The global regulatory framework is currently very uneven and in some ways nonsensical. In the United States, for instance, the Department of Agriculture says it won't regulate gene-edited crops that could otherwise have been developed through traditional breeding techniques, whatever that means. The European Union stance is a great deal stricter, approaching CRISPR techniques with a healthy degree of skepticism. Still, many argue the bloc has unfairly lumped CRISPR in with other less sophisticated forms of genetic engineering. The big question that keeps ethics professors up at night remains the issue of so-called designer babies. Using CRISPR techniques to identify potential genetic defects in embryos, as He Jiankui did with his HIV twins, is one thing. But many fear that researchers, or indeed parents, could in future insist on selecting for desirable characteristics like height, eye colour, or hyperintelligence. This would, of course, create a very lucrative business for whoever can reliably provide that system. However, expert consensus suggests that desirable qualities such as intelligence are far too complex to manipulate, involving hundreds or even thousands of different genes, each with subtle relationships and confounding environmental variables. That's for now, anyway. But with CRISPR techniques improving all the time, it probably won't be long before somebody starts experimenting in that direction, if they aren't already. So what happened to He Jiankui and the twins? Nana and Lulu, who just turned 2, have quite rightly been kept out of the media spotlight. The global scientific community urgently awaits meaningful evidence to see if their brush with CRISPR has indeed shielded them from congenital HIV, and if there were any unintended consequences. He Jiankui has since found himself sentenced to 3 years in prison for illegal medical practice and fined 3 million yuan, that's about $430,000. His fellow scientists say he went ahead with the unauthorized research in the vain hope of making a name for himself as the next scientific great, like penicillin discoverer Louis Pasteur. Fortunately, for now at least, ethics are being upheld with the full force of the law, as the implications for future global inequality are too serious to ignore. So gene editing looks set to open new frontiers in medicine, keep everybody fed, and potentially enhance future generations' prospects for surviving and thriving. However, CRISPR is still less than a decade old and needs time to mature. Let's just hope He Jiankui's fate discourages the next scientist who feels like jumping the gun. What do you think? Is manipulating the genome a good idea? Are there any applications for CRISPR techniques that we haven't covered? Let us know in the comments.
Recording in progress.
Hello and good morning. Very happy morning and velocity boosted morning to each and every one of you. So can I have a wave of hands from each and every one of you and acknowledge this beautiful morning for today? And I would like to warmly welcome each and every one of you. Very nice to have all of your videos on. Whoever can, please put your video on so that we have a beautiful, environment of learning. And for the benefit of those people who are listening to me for the first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Stan Serrao. I'm the chairman and managing director for Velocity Genetics and also an executive director for Velocity Booster. Now, I want to tell you a little about Velocity Genetics and how we really came into the space of genetics or human genetics and specifically the nutrigenomics. Now, it was way back in 2016 when we were conceptualizing as to how we can contribute in the world of wellness. We definitely understood that food should be our medicine, and I think no better times than pandemic or lockdown, where we are stuck inside our houses, to understand and realize that what significance food has on our well-being, not just physical but also mental, spiritual, and a lot other aspects of our holistic living. So friends, with that thought, we just explored as to what are the latest trends in the world of genetics, and we found out that genomic wellness is the right now the major trend that's happening across the world. Now, when I say genomic wellness, we need to be experiencing wellness based on what our genes say. So sometimes you might also hear statements by which say that you are what your genes are. While that may be debatable, what we need to really understand is that we are all unique. Very frequently we use this phrase that our fingerprints don't match. That precisely means that we are different from the others. But it's just not the fingerprints, it's not the iris of our eyes, but it's every cell of our body is unique and much different from the others to the tune of 0.01%. That means 0.1%. In other words, 99.9%, we are all similar. We all look similar. But 0.1% is a difference that we all carry. And that's between Homo sapiens or human beings. So, जैसे genetics के बारे में जब भी हम लोग बात करते हैं, we will really understand that even a 0.1% का जो difference है, that also can create a world of difference for all of us. What is of good food for you may be a kind of a small or slow poison for me. What are your physical traits need not necessarily carried by me, though we might be 99.9% similar. So this is exactly what you will understand going ahead, understanding the world of genetics. अगर आपने ये वीडियो को थोड़ा सा बारीकी से concentrate होके देखा है, you will understand that the video was talking about CRISPR-Cas9 technology, which actually also allows a person to modify the genes of an embryo and then have a genetically modified baby. हम लोगों ने देखा है कि the food grains that we are eating, or the fruits or the vegetables that we are now consuming, are all genetically modified for various purposes, to have a more commercial yield and to have the economy, the people who are involved in the agricultural sector are now using the technology, and that's why the genetically modified foods have been introduced, and I think we are all consuming all that. But having said that, well, there are good advantages of any one technology, and also there are disadvantages of any technology. So that's the conflict of modern technology, because in the video that you also saw, there are two ladies that were given the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in the year 2020 for discovering the advantages of CRISPR-Cas9 टेक्नोलॉजी, तो उसके बारे में आप गूगल में और सर्च कर सकते हैं और पता कर सकते हैं. So friends, with that thought, we understood that, not just the food thy medicine, let food be thy medicine, but also there are so many other things that we can find out. So fundamentally, genetics talks about two major aspects. अगर हम लोग layman language है, एक साधारण सरल भाषा में इसको समझेंगे, there are two aspects that are very, very relevant to us. A, it actually helps us find out the root cause of various health conditions or ailments or diseases we are currently experiencing. So it actually gives you a different paradigm or a different, paradigm shift or a different prism of, scientific insights. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is it also predicts what are the possible future health complications or diseases you are prone to. What are the risk factors you are carrying? So it's like saying something that is going to happen in the future, which has not really happened, but with the scientific evidence, which is based on the genetic structures that we have. Now, in all the presentations that we have done with regard to genetics, I'm sure you must have understood basic things as to our body's made up of systems, organs, tissues, and cells. And these cells carry nucleus. Nucleus has 23 sets of chromosomes. They come from father and mother. And then we have DNA in the chromosomes, and a segment of DNA is called the genes. And in that genes, you have nucleotides. Nucleotides are A, T, C, and G. Now, we might see that, the world of genetics has actually expanded so much that today it's enabling the scientific world to understand a body like a book. You can actually read a human body like a book. So it's an amazing, feeling. So we were so fascinated. We were so excited with this new technology. We thought that we need to create a lot of awareness and take this concept to, ordinary people who are health conscious, who would like to experience the optimum level of well-being through eating the right food, doing the right exercise regimen, and also, following a lifestyle pattern that suits their genetic makeup. So, is background ke saath we started, conceptualizing our genetic world, and that's how Velocity Life Sciences Private Limited was launched in the year 2016. We rolled out our commercial applications of various genetic products in the year 2017, and we also conceptualized a training and education platform in the name of WIGNET. So WIGNET stands for Velocity Institute of Genomics, Nutrition, and Entrepreneurship Training. I don't need to tell you that during the lockdown, we have really understood also what's the importance of we having a constant revenue generation or income generating, mechanism, whether it is a job or profession or the small or big, medium or micro businesses, or, being a part of the corporate world, or simply being a self-employed person. We all need to, generate revenue. Agar wo bhi nahi hota hai, it will have an impact on our, health, because the holistic wellness talks not just about physical, but also emotional, intellectual, financial, and a lot many other aspects. So financial wellness hona bhi bahut zaruri hai. So WIGNET also focuses not just on genetics, not just on nutrition, but also entrepreneurship training. So that's what our mission has been. And in the last 4 years, I'm very happy and proud to say that we have reached out to lakhs of people across the world. We have sequenced more than 10,000 people from across the world, and a lot of Indians who are staying outside India, who when they come to for the holidays, they really come to know about what are the genetic products that we are offering, and they've been very happy to take this service as well. So we have done counseling of Indians who are staying outside India in almost 20 different countries. So with this background, we also thought that we need to get into a little bit of science as well, क्योंकि एक आम तौर पे जेनेटिक्स को समझना एक बात है, but then अगर थोड़ा उसको साइंटिफिक तरीके से समझेंगे, which may not be a high profile academically oriented scientific program, बट एक आम व्यक्तियों के लिए जेनेटिक्स की थोड़ा साइंस की तरफ लेके जाने वाली एक प्रक्रिया है. And that's where in Vignet we started this series of programs. Earlier we used to call it an accreditation of the genetics program, but now we have converted that into sustained accreditation for genomic education. And why it is sustained? Because genetics is relatively a very, very new stream of healthcare. The Human Genome Project started only in the year 1990 and it ended in 2003. So from 2003, we're just around 17 years of experimentation that's happening, out of which almost 10 to 12 years genetics was there only with the field of researchers, scientists, and the academia. But it just came out to the public sector in 2009 and 10 in the US, but it rolled out to India in the year around 2012. And to the open public, people could now make use of this technology to understand themselves better, and this is what people have been able to experience. So in 2016, पिछले 4-5 साल से people are now today talking about genetics, the ordinary people, but there is of course the healthcare industry or the wellness and other industry which definitely talks about in a different perspective. So there are different dimensions of genetics, whether it is nutrigenomics, which deals with nutrition and lifestyle modifications. There is also pharmacogenomics. So how the medicines that we are consuming is going to have efficacy. And there are, of course, forensic DNA and a lot more other things, which eventually you will be able to explore in the next 2 days that we are going to have, during this symposium. So friends, first of all, I'd like to once again extend a very, very warm welcome. It's a little unusual time for all of you because we have our webinars usually in the evening and second half. And even if we have in the first half, it starts at 12. But today we have started at 10 o'clock. So thank you for logging in on time and creating an environment of learning. So I would like to, I want you to type as to which state or even country, if you're other than India, you're representing yourself from. So could you please type and then understand so that, we get a, more or less an idea as to where are the people logging in from different places. So you can actually write write the name of the city or the state. So we get a perspective as to where you all are logging in. And then I see 100 plus people, 116 right now, and I'm expecting a few more people to join in as we start. So yeah, I could see people literally from every part of India. And आप सभी लोगों के लिए फिर एक बार हार्दिक स्वागत है. And ये program में we are going to have this program today and tomorrow. So what I'm going to do right now is that, of course, if you could stop chatting right now, otherwise you will probably miss it and you'll have to scroll down up and see. Okay, great. I understood that people are from different places. So here is the program schedule for today. Okay, so I'll just type and I'm sure, yeah, the whole text is there. So you can just read your text. So we're going to have 4 sessions today, and each session is of around 30-35 minutes. And we're going to have a 10 minutes time for you to ask questions and understand the subject a little better. So we will try to close this session by around 1:15, hopefully, if you all cooperate and be able to understand the subject with a lot of attention. So to begin with, can I see all of you smiling? I think we need to have a environment of learning. Learning has to be fun. We can't really be sitting on a gloomy saying that abhi kya PhD karna padega subah utke. It doesn't really work like that. So we got to have a lot of fun. And I think to begin with, just to cheer you up, let me play this small video. I think this will definitely brighten us up and create an environment of learning. Let's see. Okay, so I'm sure some of you must have seen this video. Just pay a little attention also to the subtitle.
Ready? Yeah. Clap, clap, clap your hands, clap your hands. And now we're gonna go faster. Are you ready? Yeah. Yeah? Okay, I let you breathe again.
Well, does that put a little smile on your faces? So that's how we learn, we learn with a lot of fun. हम लोग ऐसे सोचते हैं कि भाई ये सीखने का काम जो है बच्चों का ही है, बड़ों का नहीं है. But I think we all say this very enthusiastically and with a lot of confidence, saying that आखिरी सांस तक सीखना है. But then many times we stop a little, back and then say, okay, look, learning is not something that I'm very comfortable with. So, we are going to talk about genetics, we are going to talk about human genetics and nutrigenomics, and we are also going to talk a few aspects of, epigenetics. So these are all थोड़ा अजीब शब्द हो सकते हैं, थोड़े नए शब्द हो सकते हैं, and of course many amongst you must be very familiar with the world of genetics. So either you're an expert or you are a novice or a new person. I think we're going to have a great time listening to various speakers. We've been working in this field of genetics, nutrition, and epigenetics for a few years. So we're going to start, and as you can see in your chat, that the program schedule is input, it's pasted, so you can actually access that. And I want to tell you a couple of housekeeping rules: is that you're all on mute, and we also have this chat open for the public. So that means everybody can chat in an open forum, and your chat can be seen by others as well. So be responsible when you chat. When the session is happening, if you've got your questions, hold on. We'll have an opportunity to have the questions answered at the end of the session, and our speakers would be very happy and candid to answer all your questions to the best of their knowledge, and they all are experts in their respective fields. So let's start the day, and I'd like to now bring in the first speaker for the Sustained Accreditation for Genomic Education Season 6. And as you have heard me giving a little introduction, I want to tell you, in the last 1 year, in the lockdown itself, we have had 5 very, very enriching, very empowering SAGE programs. And I would like to now introduce the first speaker for the 6th SAGE season. And we have the first speaker who is with us is Dr. Vimal Karani. Now, I want to give a little formal introduction about him. He is the professor in nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics in the University of Reading, UK. He is also the program director for food and nutritional sciences degree programs in the University of Reading, UK. And he is also the principal investigator and founder of Genuine. Genuine stands for Genetic Nutrient Interactions. That's the collaboration that he has. So academically, he has done his postdoctoral training at the MRC Epidemiology Unit, which is in Cambridge, UK. And he's also a senior research fellowship at the University College London, United Kingdom. So he has received advanced training in epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, London, United Kingdom. He is an interdisciplinary academic background with qualification from medical genetics, bioinformatics, molecular biology, and genetic epidemiology. So vast background, and he has published a lot of medical papers and journals in various research publications across the world. He's written a lot of projects. He's been also working extensively with lower income, generating countries, where what are the nutritional deficiencies that these countries are having, and what are the problems these countries are having at the national level. And then he's been helping with his research work. And with the Velocity Genetics, he is also a very respectable and very resourceful advisory board member of our medical scientific advisor for our advisory board. And he is a very proud Indian. And yes, session will be done in English, so I will translate, or rather give you a gist of things in the end during the question and answer. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Professor Vimal Karani for the first session. So Professor Vimal, the screen is to you, so you could take over from here.
Thank you so much, Stan, for a great introduction. A very good morning to everyone. So without any further delay, let me start sharing my slides. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So today I'm going to talk to you all about genetic insights into nutrition-related chronic diseases. So in this talk, I'm going to cover some basic aspects of genetics. So I'm going to introduce you to the world of genetics, and then I'll give you some background about what is nutrigenetics and what is nutrigenomics. And then I'll take you into a couple of chronic diseases, basically focusing on obesity and diabetes. And I'm going to tell you about the genetic factors which have been identified and which have been discovered for these chronic diseases, obesity and diabetes, and briefly touch upon some of the cardiovascular disease genes. That's what I'm going to cover in this session. But before I start, let me start with a question to you all. The largest molecules in our bodies are nucleic acids, chromosomes, proteins, and amino acids. So which is the right answer? You can type the answer in the chat box. So let me see how many of you are able to get the right answer. The largest molecules in our bodies are nucleic acids, chromosomes, proteins, and amino acids. I'm expecting more answers. Some of you have said proteins, and some of you have said chromosomes and amino acids. Okay. So mostly I can see the answers B, C, and D. That's chromosome, protein, and amino acids. So let me reveal the right answer. The largest molecules in our bodies are nucleic acids, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So the nucleic acids are basically the DNA and the RNA. DNA is a deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA is a ribonucleic acid. So let's have a look at some basic aspects about like how the information from the DNA is converted to proteins. So if you take any eukaryotic cell, within an eukaryotic cell, you have the nucleus. Inside the nucleus, you have the genetic material, which is the DNA. The human DNA has got nearly about 3 billion nucleotides, 3 billion nucleotides. And there are 4 important nucleotides, namely A, C, T, and G, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. So within these nucleotides, 3 billion nucleotides, you have 40,000 genes, which have been discovered by the Human Genome Project. So what are these genes? The genes carry the information, the genetic information for producing the protein. So each gene can code for a specific protein. So these 40,000 genes will code for several proteins. And what do these proteins do? So these proteins can be enzymes, or they could be secretory proteins, or membrane proteins, or transport proteins. So all these proteins, they play an important role in carrying out various metabolic functions. So which means that any defect in the gene will have an impact on the quality and the quantity of the protein that is being secreted. And if these proteins are defective, then the metabolic functions can be affected as well, and which could be one of the reasons for the development of obesity and diabetes. So it all starts with the defects in the gene, the genetic variations, which can contribute to the impact on the protein. And the protein, if the protein is defective, then that can have an impact on the metabolic activities. If the metabolism is affected, whether it's carbohydrate metabolism or fatty acid oxidation or metabolism of the amino acids, then all these can contribute to the development of metabolic diseases such as obesity and diabetes. So if you look at this, the figure where you see is what you see is basically a cell with the nucleus, and inside the nucleus you have the double-stranded DNA. So this double-stranded DNA undergoes a process called transcription, where the double-stranded DNA is converted to a single-stranded RNA, which is called as a pre-mRNA. The pre-mRNA undergoes processing, a step which is called as a splicing, where the introns are removed and exons are spliced together. The introns are non-coding regions and exons are coding regions. So the non-coding regions will be removed and the coding regions will be joined together. So that is what is called as a processing, because we don't need the non-coding regions for the protein production. So this results in the production of the messenger RNA, that is a fully mature RNA. And this RNA is then transported to the cytoplasm, where it is being bound by the ribosome and the protein synthesis is initiated. Once the polypeptide chain is synthesized, it is released from the ribosome, and either that protein is utilized by the cell or it is transported outside of the cell to carry out various metabolic activities. So which means that if there is any defect in the DNA, that will affect the mRNA. And if the mRNA is defective, then that defect will be passed over to the proteins as well. And the protein that is being synthesized, whether it could be quality or the quantity of the protein, then that can also be affected. And eventually, the process that is being affected is a metabolism which is happening in your body. And if these metabolic activities are disrupted, that can result in the development of metabolic diseases such as obesity and diabetes. Right. So I have another question for you. So there are about 3 billion chemical base pairs in human DNA. Approximately what percent of these base pairs actually code for genes? Is it 100% or 30 to 50% or 1 to 2% or 5 to 6%? So read the question carefully. What percent of the 3 billion nucleotides, the human DNA has got 3 billion nucleotides. So what percent of these 3 billion nucleotides actually code for the genes? You can type the answers in the chat box. So which is the right answer? Is it A, B, C, or D? So I can see some answers. A, C, B, any other answer, and also D. Okay, good. There's an answer G. I don't know what that means. Okay, A. Okay, let me reveal the right answer. The right answer is 1 to 2%. So in the 3 billion nucleotides, only 1 to 2% of the human DNA actually contributes to the genes. Remember that. So which accounts for that 40,000 genes which have been discovered by the Human Genome Project. So briefly, let's touch upon what is genetic heterogeneity. So genetic heterogeneity, genetic means the genetic makeup and heterogeneity means the difference, which means that the genetic difference. So there are differences in the DNA. These differences are nothing but the genetic variations. There are genetic variations in the DNA. So you have something called as the genotype and phenotype. Genotype is the genetic representation of the individual. My genotype is unique for me and your genotype is unique for you. And that is what makes you and me different from each other. So the genotype determines the phenotype. The phenotype is nothing but the physical representation of an individual. The way I walk, the way I smile, the way I eat, all my behavioral activities, my facial expression, my health status, they all come under this big umbrella, which is the phenotype. So the phenotype refers to the physical representation of an individual, which is partly determined by your genotype. Right? So from now onwards, when I use the term genotype and phenotype, please remember genotype is the genetic representation and the phenotype is a physical representation of an individual. Now let's have a look at what is a genetic variation. Say, for example, this individual has got this particular DNA sequence, and you know that 99.9% of the DNA sequences are identical in all the individuals, except for 0.1% where you can see the genetic variations. So if you look at this particular sequence, a nucleotide, you can see that some people carry T and some people carry A. So there's a change from one nucleotide to another nucleotide, and this change is what you call as a SNP, or a single nucleotide polymorphism. So there's a change from T to A. The T is the normal genotype, the TT is the normal genotype, and those individuals who carry the A, they are said to carry the genetic variation. The A is the genetic variation, or the A is the SNP, the change from one nucleotide to another nucleotide. So depending on whether you carry T or A, you can classify individuals into three different categories as 0, 1, and 2. So those who do not carry any copies of the genetic variation, they are classified as 0 copy people, and those who carry one copy of the genetic variation and one copy without the genetic variation, they are classified as 1 copy people, and people who do not carry any, who carry 2 copies of the genetic variation, they are classified as 2 copy individuals. So for a given genetic variation, for a given SNP, you can have only 3 groups of people, either 0, 1, or 2. For example, there are about like 115 people in this session. So you will see that like at least some of them will be 0 copy people, some of you will be 1 copy, and the rest will be 2 copy people. So here, in general, 0, 1, and 2, people who carry the 2 copy, they are likely to have a higher genetic risk. They have the higher genetic risk. People who carry the 2 copy, they are likely to have a higher genetic risk. But there are some exceptions to it, but let's not go into that. But in general, people who carry the 2 copy, they have a higher genetic risk, and people who carry 1 copy, they have a moderate genetic risk, and people who carry 0 copy, they're generally classified as a wild type. They are likely to have a low genetic risk. So there's no individual who will have a 0 genetic risk. Either you belong to low genetic risk or moderate genetic risk or a high genetic risk. So here I'm talking about one genetic variation. Remember, our human DNA, which has got 3 billion nucleotides, within this 3 billion nucleotides, the studies have identified that there are about nearly 3 to 4 million single nucleotide polymorphisms. So we carry about 3 to 4 million genetic variations in our human DNA. So just imagine if you carry 2 copies in all these genetic variations, which means that you are basically accumulating your genetic risk. Your genetic risk increases with the number of copies of genetic variation that you carry in your DNA. Now let's have a look at what is this genetic risk. What does that mean? Say, for example, if you carry a 0 copy, it means low genetic risk. So what does that mean? It means that you have decreased risk of developing a disease such as obesity or diabetes. Then you have the 1 copy, which means that you have moderate genetic risk. It means that you have moderate risk of developing the disease. And the third option is where you have the 2 copy, which means that you have high genetic risk. It means that you have an increased risk of developing the disease. But this is exactly where you have the twist. Just because you carry 2 copies, it doesn't mean that you are destined to become obese or diabetic. You can still overcome this genetic risk by modifying your lifestyle. How can you modify your lifestyle? That is by doing lots of physical activity and consuming a healthy diet, a diet that is suitable for your genetic makeup. So which can overcome the genetic risk of obesity and diabetes. So this is the underlying basis on which we do the nutrigenetics and nutrigenomic studies. So with this background, let's move on to what is nutrigenetics and what is nutrigenomics. So nutrigenetics refers to the study of the impact of the genetic variations on chronic diseases in response to a particular diet. For example, if I'm consuming a high protein diet and I'm carrying 2 copies. So what is the risk of developing obesity? So to answer this question, I have to see whether there is any interaction going on between the genetic risk and the protein consumption. So I'm looking at the gene diet interaction. I'm looking at the impact of the genetic risk and the dietary intake on obesity. So that study is basically a nutrigenetic study where I'm looking at the gene diet interaction. Whereas nutrigenomics, as the name implicates, omics means expression, genomics refers to gene expression, and nutrigenomics refers to the impact of the nutrient on gene expression. So what do you mean by expression? That is where the DNA is converted to RNA and RNA is converted to proteins. Where I was explaining, like the double-stranded DNA is converted to single-stranded RNA, and the RNA goes to cytoplasm, where it is being bound by the ribosome and it initiates a protein synthesis. That process is what you call as a gene expression. So gene expression, it takes place under the influence of the diet that you're consuming. And that study is called nutrigenomics. So nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics are completely 2 different areas of research. Please remember this, because a lot of people, they use the word nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics very casually. But these 2 terminologies are completely different. Nutrigenetics deals with gene diet interactions. You're trying to look at the genetic risk, whereas nutrigenomics is dealing with gene expression. Findings from nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics are essential for implementing personalized nutrition. That is, where you're developing an optimum diet for an individual according to that individual's genetic makeup. For example, if I carry 2 copies, what is the kind of diet I should consume? So you need the information from the nutrigenetic studies. So going back to the same figure which I showed you before, so the DNA is converted to RNA and RNA to protein, and this process is what you call as a gene expression. But how is this gene expression initiated? It is initiated under the influence of the diet that you're consuming, whatever food you're consuming. Each and every food has got a nutrient in that. So the nutrient present in the food, it is eventually being absorbed by the cell. So it goes inside the cell, it goes to the cytoplasm, and it goes to the nucleus where the DNA is, and the nutrient nourishes the DNA and initiates the gene expression. So DNA requires that energy from the nutrient. So that nutrient provides the energy required for the DNA to undergo transcription and the translation. So eventually the proteins are being synthesized in your body in response to the food that you're consuming. That's why we say what you eat is what you are. So your health status is a reflection of the kind of diet that you are consuming. So now coming to the gene diet interactions, nutrigenetics. So I'm carrying out like several interesting studies as part of the nutrigenetic network that I'm leading. One is actually called as a DCARDIA collaboration, which I'm leading in the developed part of the world. So which is being funded by the British Heart Foundation. To date, we have data from the US, UK, and European countries, and with access to the UK Biobank, where we have 500,000 people, and with access to various consortia-based studies, we have nearly about like 2 million people, and these are some of the publications from the DCARDIA collaboration. And the other collaboration that I'm leading is basically the Genuine collaboration, which is focusing mainly on the lower middle-income countries, such as South Asia, Southeast Asia, South African countries, and South American countries, Middle Eastern countries. So these are the countries in which I've implemented the nutrigenetic studies for the first time, and these are some of the publications from the Genuine collaboration. So what I'm going to do now is basically going to touch upon 2 different areas of chronic diseases, obesity and diabetes, and I'm going to give you some genetic insights with regards to the findings from the DCARDIA collaboration and the Genuine collaboration. So starting with obesity. So I'm sure you all know what obesity is, but let me ask you this question. What is obesity? When you weigh more than 75 kilograms, when you have more than 20% body fat, when you have a BMI of more than 30 kilograms per meter square, and when you eat too much. So what is obesity? You can type the right answer in the chat box. So I can see some answers: C, D, C, C, and B. Okay. C. So I can see that most of the answers are C. Well, that's the right answer when you have a BMI greater than 30 kilogram per meter square. So the development of obesity is influenced by both the genetic and the environmental factors. So looking at the causes of obesity, the obesity is influenced by both genetic and the environmental factors. If you take the environmental factors, it is not just the dietary intake and physical activity, but the various other factors which have shown to have an influence or impact on obesity development. And likewise, genetic factor, it is not just one gene. Several genes have been discovered. For example, there are about like nearly 800 to 900 candidate genes that have been discovered for obesity. So it's basically an interaction between the genetic and the environmental factors, and we still haven't discovered all the genetic factors, and likewise, we still do not know what are the other environmental factors which are influencing the development of obesity. And that's why obesity has been classified as a complex disease, because the development of obesity is very complex, and it is very challenging for the researchers to understand the causes of obesity. And it is also called multifactorial disease. Why multifactorial? Because multiple factors are involved in the development of the disease. And that's why we say genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. So even if you have a high genetic risk, you can still prevent the development of obesity by changing your environment. Your environment is nothing but your diet and your exercise, your physical activity levels. So looking at the gene environment interactions on obesity, so it's basically the interaction between the genetic and the lifestyle factors which contributes to the development of obesity. As mentioned before, even if you carry a high genetic risk, you can still overcome that genetic risk by modifying your environment. So that is exactly what I'm going to focus on my talk today. So it all started off with the discovery of the obesity gene, and this gene was discovered in the year 2007. And once this gene was discovered, people strongly believe that if they carry 2 copies of this obesity gene variation, they thought they are destined to become obese. So to clear this fear from the minds of public, genetic epidemiologists, they decided to test whether doing more levels of physical activity or consuming a healthy diet, can that overcome the genetic risk of obesity? So that was the time the field of nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics came into picture of like how gene diet interactions and gene physical activity interactions could be explored. So why obesity gene? What is so important about this gene? So this gene is called as the FTO gene. FTO stands for fat mass and obesity associated gene. The genetic variants within this gene have been shown to be strongly associated with obesity traits in different populations, in different ethnic groups, in men, in women, in adults, and also in children. In these 2 studies, we were able to show that FTO showed a very strong, very high association with obesity, both adult obesity as well as childhood obesity, which clearly shows that both in children and in adults, FTO is a very strong candidate gene for obesity. So having seen such a strong effect of the obesity gene, so which means that if you carry 2 copies, then you have a high genetic risk of obesity. But if you know this much beforehand, then you can prevent the development of obesity. How can you prevent the development? By maintaining a healthy lifestyle, a lifestyle which is suitable for your DNA. So let me give you some examples of the studies of gene diet interactions involving this obesity gene. So first is a study that was done in the European population, where they found an interaction between the fat intake and obesity gene on obesity. So in this graph, on the x-axis, you find the tertiles of fat consumption. On the y-axis, you find the obesity risk. And the 3 bars that you see, white, gray, and the black bar, they implicate the three genotypes, TT, AT, and AA. So individuals with AA, they are the 2-copy individuals. And you can see that people who carry the 2 copies, they have significantly higher obesity risk. And you can see that people or individuals consuming high amounts of fat-rich foods and those with a high genetic risk, they had 2.47 times increased risk of obesity. So for example, if you are an European and you're consuming a lot of high-fat foods or junk foods and fried foods, and then you have a high genetic risk, then it means that you have a risk of obesity which is being increased by 2.47 times compared to people who have a low genetic risk. So which means that if you're able to identify your genetic risk, that if you know that you carry 2 copies, then you can change your dietary pattern and you can overcome that genetic risk. So this finding is more applicable for the European population. So let me give you an example for the Indian population, which is the first nutrigenetic study that I did in the Asian Indian population. But this study was done in South Indian population, that is from population from Chennai. So where we looked at nearly about 2,000 people, 1,000 people with diabetes and 1,000 people who were controls. And we found a very interesting interaction with the carbohydrate intake. So in this graph on the x-axis, you find the carbohydrate intake in tertiles, low, medium, and high consumption of carbohydrate. And you can see that the high consumption is like more than 500 grams of carbohydrate per day. On the y-axis, you find the odds ratio for obesity. And the red bar are people who carry a high genetic risk. And you can see that individuals consuming high amounts of carbohydrate-rich foods and those who carry a high genetic risk, they have 2.46 times increased risk of obesity. So this risk, this effect size that you see, it is almost the same as what I showed you in the previous slide for the European population. The risk is almost the same, but what is differing is basically the dietary pattern. Because the Europeans, the main source of energy comes from the dietary fat, whereas for the South Asians, the main source of energy comes from the carbs. So it's basically the change in the dietary pattern is what is required for overcoming the genetic risk of obesity. And if you look at, especially for the South Indian population, they do consume significant of carbohydrates as part of their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So reducing the consumption, that is less than 300 grams of carbohydrate per day, might be an effective way to overcome the genetic risk of obesity for South Indians. And another ethnic group, that is the Southeast Asian population, Indonesian population. So they consume a diet which is completely different from the South Asians and Europeans. They do consume significant amount of meat products. So which means that there is increased consumption of animal protein. So let's have a look at the interactions with the protein intake. So here in this graph on x-axis, you find the low, medium, and high consumption of protein. On the y-axis, you have the waist circumference, which is an indicator of central obesity. And the white bar with dots is a low genetic risk, and the red bar is basically the high genetic risk. So if you focus on those individuals who consume low amounts of protein, so low means it is not actually low. It was just for the statistical purpose. People were stratified as low, medium, and high. The low refers to about 70 to 75 grams of protein per day, which is something which is a normal protein recommendation, dietary protein recommendation. So individuals who are consuming 70 to 75 grams of protein per day, and those who carry a high genetic risk, they had lower levels of waist circumference. So what does that mean? We know that if you have a high genetic risk, that is, if you carry 2 copies, it means that you will have higher waist circumference. But here, these people, by consuming a low protein diet, that is, consuming a normal intake of the dietary proteins, they were able to reduce their waist circumference significantly compared to people who were consuming medium and high consumption of protein. Because the high consuming group, they were consuming nearly about 140 grams of protein per day. So which clearly shows that reducing the consumption of meat products, so reducing the consumption of animal protein might be an effective way, because the Indonesian, they do consume the meat. There's actually a study that was done in a Minangkabau community. The Minangkabau community is a very unique community, and they cook a food which is called as a beef rendang, which is very commonly being cooked in every other house in Indonesia, and especially in this community. And they do consume like 3 to 4 times a week, which is being cooked, which is fried, and also so there's increased consumption of animal protein, which needs to be reduced for this population. But besides the dietary intake, physical activity also plays a very important role. That is, good levels of physical activity can overcome the genetic risk of obesity. So how does it happen? So we carried out the study in the UK population, about 20,000 people, where we found like 4 different levels of physical activity. Some people were active, some people were moderately active, and some people were moderately inactive. And there was some significant number of people who were physically inactive. On the y-axis, you find the BMI, and the 3 colored bars that you see, the white is 0 copy, and the yellow is 1 copy, and the green bar are people who carry 2 copies. And you can see that people who carry 2 copies, they have significantly higher levels of BMI compared to 1 copy and 0 copy people. But if you look at each of these groups, the effects are very prominent among people who are leading a sedentary lifestyle or inactive lifestyle, where you see that people carrying 2 copies, they have significantly higher levels of BMI. And the effect is 0.44. So what is that 0.44? It means that 0.44 kilogram per meter square increase in BMI for every 1 copy that you carry. So if you carry 1 copy of the genetic variation, so you will have an increase in BMI by 0.44 kilogram per meter square for 1 copy. So which means that for 2 copies, the increase in BMI will be 0.88 kilogram per meter square increase. So this is how you interpret this particular effect size. So 0.44 kilogram per meter square increase in BMI for every 1 copy if you lead an inactive lifestyle. But if you look at the effect for the other 3 levels of activity, which is 0.2, which is half of what you see for the inactive group. So which means that if you lead a physically inactive lifestyle, then you're going to increase the genetic risk of obesity. But if you lead an active lifestyle, you can overcome the genetic risk. So this is the take-home message from this study, and also from the other examples that I gave you, because healthy lifestyle can overcome the genetic risk of obesity. So in summary, we have seen that there is a genetic risk for obesity, but how can you overcome that genetic risk? By lowering your dietary fat, by lowering your carbohydrate consumption, consuming the normal amounts of protein recommendation, dietary protein intakes, and doing good levels of physical activity. But all these findings, the dietary fat was seen in European population, and carbohydrate consumption was seen in Indian population, and protein consumption was seen in Indonesian population. Physical activity was observed in the UK population. So we need to take into account of all these countries when you're implementing personalized nutrition strategies. So if you want to implement a personalized diet for a population, you need to use the findings from that population rather than using the findings from other ethnic groups. That's a very important message. So if you're interested in knowing what I'm doing in other parts of the world, feel free to go into this publication, which will give you a better understanding of what I'm doing in the Genuine Collaboration. So now let's move on to type 2 diabetes and related traits. I'm sure you know what diabetes is. So one unique feature about the South Asians, especially when it comes down to Asian Indians, that is, in spite of having a lower BMI, the South Asians or Asian Indians, they have more abdominal fat, and that's exactly why we call them as thin fat Indians. There's a thin layer of abdominal fat. Even though they have a normal BMI, or even though they have a lower BMI, they still have a thin layer of abdominal fat, which is predisposing them to become diabetic. And also they have higher levels of insulin resistance and also hyperinsulinemia, and they have higher levels of C-reactive protein, which is an important inflammatory marker, and they have lower levels of adiponectin. Adiponectin levels need to be higher, and lower levels of adiponectin is an indication of obesity. And characteristic dyslipidemia, that is lower levels of good cholesterol and higher levels of bad cholesterol. And all these factors can predispose an individual to become diabetic. And once you become diabetic, you have increased risk for cardiovascular disease such as coronary artery disease. And these features is what you call as an Asian Indian phenotype. So this Asian Indian phenotype, besides these factors, there is also a genetic predisposition, which is partly attributing to this Asian Indian phenotype. So according to the International Diabetes Federation, the studies have clearly shown that by 2030 and 2045, we are going to be reaching about 600 to 700 million people with diabetes across the globe. So this is globally, but what is happening in India alone? So this clearly shows that diabetes is one of the fastest growing health challenges of the 21st century. So this is happening globally, but what is happening in India? In India now, as of 2019, there are about 77 million people with diabetes. Definitely during this period, the last 1 year of pandemic, I'm sure that a lot of people might have developed diabetes. And by 2030 and 2045, we are going to reach around about 100 to 135 million people with diabetes just from Indian population alone. So how do we prevent this? What is the way by which you can prevent type 2 diabetes? One of the best ways to prevent type 2 diabetes is to enable early diagnosis. Because if you're able to diagnose much in advance, even before you develop type 2 diabetes, that will give you an option to improve the treatment strategies and also take preventive measures. And also that will give a better understanding of the complex pathogenesis of diabetes. So that's why we say prevention is better than cure. So enabling early diagnosis, how can you diagnose type 2 diabetes much earlier? Because before you develop diabetes, you might have some symptoms, but even before the development of the symptom, the only marker that will tell you that whether you have a high risk or not is basically your genetic markers. So identifying your genetic markers alone will be the only condition on which you will know that you have a high genetic risk or a low genetic risk or a moderate genetic risk. So let me ask you a question. For type 2 diabetes, is it genes or lifestyle? It's mostly due to our genes. It's nothing to do with genes. It's all about lifestyle. It's mainly about lifestyle, but there may be some influence of genes. It's mainly about genes, but lifestyle might affect it a bit. So which is the right answer? Can you type the right answers in the chat box? I'll give you a few seconds. Most of you have typed C. Are there any other answers? And there's one answer B. Good. Oh, there's also D. Well, the right answer is C. It's mainly about lifestyle, but there may be some influence of the genes. So as mentioned before, you might carry the genes for type 2 diabetes, but it doesn't mean that you're destined to become diabetic. You can still overcome that genetic risk by modifying your lifestyle, right? So that is what the advantage that you have. So understanding the pathophysiology of type 2 diabetes, there are three important components: genetics, environment, and epigenetics. So I'm not going to touch upon epigenetics because that will be covered by someone else. But I'm going to focus on the genetics and the environment, which are equally important for the development of type 2 diabetes. So the genetic variants and the nutrient intake, that interaction is what you call as nutrigenetics. So there are some studies which have shown that unhealthy diet can lead to the development of type 2 diabetes. And also there are studies that have shown that carrying 2 copies of the genetic variations predispose an individual to become diabetic. But what I'm going to focus is basically about the gene-diet interaction on the risk of development of type 2 diabetes. So there are several genes that have been discovered for type 2 diabetes. So what I'm showing you now are basically the chromosomes and the location of the genes on these chromosomes. So I'm going to touch upon just one important gene for type 2 diabetes, which is the TCF7L2 gene. So TCF7L2 stands for transcription factor 7L2 gene variation. So there are several studies that have shown that the TCF7L2 gene polymorphisms are associated with type 2 diabetes. And these are some of the studies. For example, the studies have been carried out in Iceland, Denmark, US, Finnish, French, Dutch population, and the UK population, and also in Asian Indians. A study that was conducted in the Pune population and also a study that was conducted in the Chennai population. And both these studies have shown almost the same effect size, which means that if you carry 2 copies of the genetic variation for the TCF7L2 gene, then you have 1.5 times increased risk of type 2 diabetes. So you're able to identify that you have a genetic risk of type 2 diabetes if you carry 2 copies of the TCF7L2 gene variation. But how do you overcome that? For that, you need to know the gene-diet interaction, whether the healthy diet can overcome the genetic risk. So looking at the gene-diet interactions, we also carried out a literature review. So this is basically a table showing different gene-diet interaction studies that have been carried out in relation to type 2 diabetes. But the most extensively studied gene has been the TCF7L2 gene variants. So that gene has been extensively studied. So with this in mind, like we carried out some nutrigenetic studies. So I have another question for you. Are there nutrigenetic studies on diabetes in Asian countries? No? Yes, a lot of studies are available, very few, and I have no idea. So which is the right answer, do you think? Are there nutrigenetic studies on diabetes in Asian countries? So Asian countries includes South Asia, Southeast Asia, or West Asia. So there's some answers B, C, A. Okay, fine. So it's very difficult to say because like 7 years ago, before I started the Genuine collaboration, technically there were no nutrigenetic studies for the Indian population. But now we do have a few studies. So the right answer for time being now it is basically C. Very few studies are available not only for Indian population, also for the lower middle income countries. We do need a lot of nutrigenetic studies which can enable personalized nutrition services. So I'm just going to give you an example of the first nutrigenetic study that was done in relation to the TCF7L2 gene variation for the Indian population. So this study I did in sometime in the year 2017, and that was published in PLOS One. So I'll briefly touch upon what exactly we did. So this gene is a gene for type 2 diabetes, but here, interestingly, we found an impact on high-density lipoprotein cholesterol. High-density lipoprotein cholesterol is basically a good cholesterol. So here we found an interaction with the dietary fat intake on HDL cholesterol. So let's have a look at the interaction here. So first, we wanted to know whether the dietary fat consumption is having any impact on HDL cholesterol. So in this graph, the p-value is 0.55, which clearly shows that consumption of dietary fat doesn't have any impact on HDL cholesterol. So there was no significant association. But in the same graph, when we introduced the genetic component, that is the red bar is basically people with high genetic risk, and the blue bar is people with low genetic risk. And if you focus on people consuming low amounts of dietary fat and people carrying a high genetic risk. So here you can see that even if people who carry high genetic risk, even if you carry a high genetic risk, these people by consuming low fat diet, that is around less than 40 grams of fat per day, they were able to increase their HDL cholesterol. Remember, HDL cholesterol is good cholesterol. So they were able to increase their good cholesterol even if they had a high genetic risk. How did they increase the good cholesterol? By reducing their fat consumption. So reducing or lowering the fat content as part of the diet can help you to overcome the genetic risk of having low HDL cholesterol. And also we found the same finding with the PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acid. So initially we did not see any impact of PUFA on HDL cholesterol, but when we introduced the genetic factor into the analysis, we were able to see that people who have a high genetic risk, they were able to improve their HDL cholesterol by reducing the PUFA intake. So this clearly shows that consuming a healthy diet can overcome the genetic risk of having low HDL cholesterol. So what is the gene-diet interaction over here? So we know that the TCF7L2 is a gene for diabetes, and it is not a gene for HDL cholesterol. There was no association independently. And also we found that the fat was not showing any impact on HDL cholesterol. But for people who carry 2 copies of this genetic variation, and those who are consuming low amounts of fat, they were able to increase the good cholesterol levels. Whereas people who carry 2 copies of the genetic variation and consuming high amounts of fat-rich foods, total fat and the PUFA intake, they were having low levels of good cholesterol. So this is exactly what you call as a gene-diet interaction, or in other words, it's the interplay between nutrition and the genome. So if you're able to detect this genetic risk and you're able to modify your dietary fat consumption, in that way you can boost your good cholesterol level. So this study was published in the year 2017. And so this is basically the press release of the findings from this genuine collaboration, where we were able to show that the healthy lifestyle can overcome the genetic risk of heart disease, but that is by boosting your good cholesterol level. So these are some of the other press release of the reports. And also in this study, besides TCF7L2 gene, we also looked at the MC4R. MC4R is a melanocortin 4 receptor. I'm not going to go into the details, but just informing you that it's another important candidate for obesity. So here we looked at a diabetes gene, which is a TCF7L2, and also the MC4R. And all these genes are very crucial when understanding the genetic risk of obesity and diabetes. So I have a question for you. Pre-diabetes is considered a reversible condition. False, true, partly false, true, but only in some people. So pre-diabetes is considered a reversible condition. So which one is right? A, B, C, or D? That's right. The right answer is true. You can reverse the condition. So which means that if you're able to detect the genetic risk of developing diabetes, you can prevent the development of diabetes. That is one way. But once you are in a pre-diabetic stage, you can still reverse the condition by understanding your genetic risk and modifying your lifestyle according to your genetic makeup. So there are also other genes for cardiometabolic diseases, not just obesity and diabetes. So this is a recent figure that I've taken from a recent publication. So where they have clearly highlighted different genes for different cardiometabolic diseases. Like, for example, there are genes for diabetes, obesity, dyslipidemia, hypertension, and most interestingly, they have also classified some of the genes for the risk factors such as smoking, and also other traditional or classic risk factors. So I've already touched upon the FTO gene, which is the gene for obesity, and the TCF7L2 gene for diabetes. And there is also MC4R here. And dyslipidemia gene is basically the ApoE. ApoE stands for apolipoprotein E, which is another important gene for dyslipidemia and also for the cardiovascular risk factors. So there are various genetic factors which play a crucial role in the development of cardiometabolic diseases. So before I finish, I would like to give you some of the studies that I've done in relation to how I've used a genetic approach to understand the relationship between the diet and disease. So for example, if you have a particular deficiency of a nutrient, say for example, B12 deficiency or vitamin D deficiency, so that can lead to different diseases. But how do you find that relationship using a genetic approach? So we have used this DCardia collaboration data to understand that. So for example, briefly touching upon what exactly we did. The first study that we did was we wanted to know whether obesity leads to vitamin D deficiency or whether low levels of vitamin D was contributing to obesity. But using this genetic approach, we were able to show that obesity was associated with vitamin D deficiency. That is, for every 10% increase in BMI, there was a 4.2% decrease in vitamin D concentrations. And once you become vitamin D deficient, The next stage was the development of cardiovascular disease related outcomes such as blood pressure, having high blood pressure and having high blood pressure and having higher risk of hypertension. So these were the risk factors that we were able to show. So having significantly higher levels of vitamin D concentrations can overcome the genetic risk of cardiovascular disease, so which we were able to show a causal impact. And also quite recently, we also published a paper looking at cancer, where we found that higher levels of vitamin D concentrations was able to overcome the genetic risk of prostate cancer. And the study that we published a couple of years ago, which is a vitamin D pregnant mother cohort study, where we looked at the pregnant mothers in the first trimester, the second, third trimester, and we also looked at the newborn babies. And we were able to show that the pregnant mothers during the third trimester, if they have a high genetic risk and if they are vitamin D deficient, then those mothers basically gave birth to babies which had small head circumference, suggesting that vitamin D deficiency during pregnancy can have a significant impact on the fetal growth. And a couple of years ago, we also carried out another study where we were able to show that the genetic risk, if you have a very high genetic risk of obesity, you can also develop other diseases which are related to the endocrine system, circulatory system, digestive system, skin infection. So there are about 33 different diseases that can develop if you have a high genetic risk for obesity, and of course, which can be prevented by modifying your lifestyle. And independently, we also looked at a study where we found that having high genetic risk of depression. So there's always a question whether is it depression that is causing obesity, or is it being obese which is making a person very depressed. So we wanted to examine that, and we found that people who have a very high genetic risk of depression, very high genetic risk of disturbed mental health, they are likely to become obese. And that study was published again a few years ago. And quite recently, like a month ago, we were able to show that there was a link between milk intake and cardiometabolic diseases, even though there was a link with obesity. But the study clearly showed in 2 million people from different parts of the world, we were able to show that consuming milk doesn't have any impact on cardiovascular diseases, which means that even if you increase the consumption of milk more than a glass per day, that still doesn't have any impact on the development of cardiovascular diseases. So we have plenty of information about the genetic factors which play an important role in various areas of nutrition-related chronic diseases. So the next step is basically how we are going to utilize that. So for example, not only with the vitamin D deficiency, also with the vitamin B12 status, which is also very crucial. And we published a recent paper from the Genuine Collaboration, where we have clearly looked at different studies contributing to the B12 deficiency, how genetic factors for obesity and diabetes, for example, if you have genetic risk for obesity or genetic risk for diabetes, that can lead to B12 deficiency as well. So the next step is basically the personalized nutrition. So how can you develop a personalized diet? By taking into account of your genetic risk and also taking into account of your dietary patterns, your levels of physical activity. So that varies from one person to another person, an ethnic group to another ethnic group, from one population to another population. So the personalization has to be at an individual level, and for which you need good basic understanding of the genetic insights into these nutrition-related chronic diseases. So on this note, I would like to thank all the GCardia collaborators and the Genuine collaborators. And finally, thank you so much for listening to the talk. And if you have any questions in future, you can drop me an email at v.karani@reading.ac.uk. And I'm also available on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter as Vimal Karani. So thank you all so much for listening to the talk, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Vimal Karani. That was awesome, very, very informative and very exhaustive, information on the two major lifestyle diseases that we have. दोस्तों, 3 चीजें आपको इस टॉक में समझनी है. सबसे पहले अपना जेनेटिक सीक्वेंसिंग करिए और ये पता कर लीजिए कि आपकी जेनेटिक रिस्क क्या है, 0 कॉपी है, 1 कॉपी है या 2 कॉपी है, which we have been gifted from our parents. तो वो अगर पता कर लेंगे तो हमको जेनेटिक रिस्क हमारी कितनी है ये पता चल जाएगा. बट हैविंग सेड दैट कि गुड न्यूज ये भी है कि जेनेटिक रिस्क हाई है तो जरूरी नहीं है कि हमको जो बीमारियों के लक्षण है वो आ ही जाएगी. इसके लिए क्योंकि हमारे पास एक शस्त्र है जिसको हम लोग यूज कर सकते हैं और वो है लाइफस्टाइल मॉडिफिकेशंस. तो वही काम वेलोसिटी जेनेटिक्स करती है कि आप अपना जेनेटिक्स की क्या जोखिम है इसको समझ लीजिए और उसके बाद में एक जीन बेस्ड एक्शन प्लान जो देते हैं उसमें आपको ये सॉल्यूशंस या एक विकल्प हम लोग देते हैं कि आपको ये सुधार अपने लाइफ में करना है. उसको सीरियसली ले लीजिएगा. कई बार हमको ऐसा लगता है कि ठीक है मैंने रिपोर्ट कर लिया, घर पे पड़ा हुआ है या कोई पीडीएफ है और एक्शन प्लान भी मिल गया तो ठीक है मेरे पास है. हैविंग दैट और उसको प्रैक्टिस ना करेंगे तो उसमें ज्यादा कुछ भी फायदा नहीं है. तो आई वुड लाइक टू रियली थैंक. सो लेट्स वेव आवर हैंड्स and acknowledge Dr. Vimal Karani for this wonderful session. It comes with a lot of research, a very, very passionate, involvement into this subject. So, बहुत आसान सरल भाषा में उन्होंने एक आम व्यक्तियों को समझा दिया. जैसे मैंने कहा, we are not PhD students और post graduate student, but एक आम लोग हैं. तो बहुत अच्छी तरीके से आप सभी लोगों को उन्होंने समझा दिया. इसके लिए उनके लिए धन्यवाद. So, thank you very much, Dr. Vimal. I don't think we have actually time for a lot of questions. So we need to move on to the next sessions. And if there are any questions, we'll get back definitely through a lot of various sessions that we have as well. So now let's move to the second session. And before that, I want to tell you, and I want you to listen to this very carefully. I guess the year 2000, there was this cyclone called the super cyclone in Orissa. And Orissa and West Bengal, jo Bay of Bengal mein jo ye do rajya hain, they're all prone to a lot of cyclone related disasters. ये हुआ था 2000 में. अब 2021 में और लास्ट देखोगे लास्ट 2 साल में 3 तूफान आ गए, आंधी मतलब साइक्लोन्स आ गए. सबसे पहले अम्फान, उसमें से काफी डैमेज हुई. उसके बाद में तौकते आ गया था अभी लॉकडाउन में हाल ही में 15-20 दिन के पहले. और देन वी एक्चुअली हैड साइक्लोन यास एज वेल. अब just imagine in 2000, due to super cyclone in Odisha, there were 10,000 people that were killed. But the Indian, IMD, the Indian Meteorological Department, got into action. They researched a lot. They sent the technology or satellite to the space. वो टेक्नोलॉजी के जरिए उन्होंने अभी ये पता कर लिया कि आगे आने वाले तूफान के बारे में वो पहले से पता करें. तो जब भी आप देखोगे whether it is Tokte or whether it is Yas, इसके बारे में सबसे मतलब काफी दिनों के पहले ही जो इंफॉर्मेशन दिया गया. तो जो स्थलीय प्रशासन है, the local administration could actually go back there and then relocate people. They can actually control the disaster management. And ये सब करने के बाद में you could understand that the damage of the civilians or the people damage is very, very minimized. अब तौकते में देखोगे तो hardly I guess around 20-30 people have been died in Tokte, except for one barge tragedy that happened in Mumbai or in Maharashtra. But if you see cyclone Yas, very less people actually have been affected. Now why did this happen? It's because of the foresight of our researchers. एंड उनके रिसर्च की वजह से जो टेक्नोलॉजी को उन्होंने आजमाया और उसके तहत जो इंफॉर्मेशन आपको पहले से मिला उसके जरिए आप ये जो ह्यूमन ट्रेजेडी है उसको अवॉइड कर सके. नाउ कम टू दिस एंड अप्लाई दिस लॉजिक इनटू द मेडिकल वर्ल्ड. जैसे डॉक्टर विमल करानी ने कहा, इंडिया में अभी 8 करोड़ लोग हैं जो डायबिटिक, शुगर, मधुमेह के बीमारी से जूझ रहे हैं. एंड प्री डायबिटिक, हालांकि उसको ठीक कर सकते हैं लेकिन लोगों को अभी फुल फ्लेज डायबिटिक हुआ नहीं है. तो इसकी वजह से लोग सोचते ठीक है जब होगा देखा जाएगा. तो 8 करोड़ और लोग हैं जिनको डायबिटिक अभी होने वाला है 3-5 साल 10 साल में. दैट मीन्स वी हैव अराउंड 15-16 crores of people who are going to be diabetic patient, just one disease. Now look at a lot of other lifestyle conditions like cardiac related issues. So in the pandemic, we have seen a lot of people who have died out of COVID-19, but बहुत सारे और लोगों की मौत हुई है जो कार्डियक कंडीशंस को अटेंड नहीं कर पाए क्योंकि ओपीडीज बंद है, अस्पताल में प्रैक्टिस नहीं हो रहा है. कई सारे लोग डर भी रहे हैं कि भाई घर में रिकवरी अच्छी होगी, हॉस्पिटल जाना नहीं है. All this is the situation. Just imagine, friends, if we have a mechanism to find out what are the future diseases that we can get, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years before, and उसके लिए जो दवा है, उसके लिए जो लाइफस्टाइल चेंजेस है, उसके लिए जो भी फूड कंजम्पशन है, वो अगर अभी से हम लोग चेंज करना लगे और हमारे डे टू डे दिन में उसको हम लोग इम्प्लीमेंट करें, नॉट कंसिडरिंग दिस एज अ पनिशमेंट or depriving of some fun that we can have with food and everything, I think it's going to be a fantastic thing. So that at the government level, government definitely should be thinking, whereas of course we are काफी इसमें पीछे हैं, we are still looking at very, very unscientific things. So now, what's the role of genetics in the medical world? इसके बारे में चर्चा करने के लिए we've got the next speaker, and it's a very, very special person. He is a medical doctor, and I would be very proudly saying that he is a doctor with a lot of difference, and the reason for that is he is not only a very senior accomplished surgeon with vast academic background and practical background of conducting a lot of surgery, treating a lot of patients, but he is somebody who actually introduced or rather fought for his community, amongst his community, for patient-centric ethical medical practices. आपने अभी देखा बहुत तो वहां पे पेशेंट्स के इंटरेस्ट को उतना ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं दिया जाता है, because every hospital and every establishment all is a commercial establishment. वहां पे बिल्डिंग है, वहां पे बहुत सारा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, बहुत सारा खर्चा है, तो इसके लिए seen as more commercial and business. But within that environment, to fight for a patient-centric their rights and treatment is it deserves special appreciation. So he is a senior urologist. He hails from Belgaum of Karnataka, where he owned his own practice and hospital. And in his hospital, he has actually treated a lot of economically lower strata के लोग जो poor patients हैं, उनको free of cost treatment surgery उन्होंने किया है, and खास करके लॉकडाउन के दौरान भी हमारे लिए उन्होंने webinars किए हैं, and he's been one person. I wish we have doctors like this with a human touch and a lot of empathy towards his patients. So I would like to, with your waving of your hands, would like to introduce the next speaker, our very own, the medical advisor board के member हैं, Dr. Nikhil Valjakar. Dr. Nikhil Valjakar, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Stan, for those kind words. Good morning to all of you. And Stan, if you can start the presentation, I would like to proceed with my talk.
Yes.
So, आज का जो मेरा जो टॉपिक मुझे दिया गया है वो है रोल ऑफ न्यूट्रिजिनोमिक्स इन कोविड, लेकिन उसके पहले मैं थोड़ा सा रोल ऑफ न्यूट्रिजिनोमिक्स इन क्लिनिकल मेडिसिन के बारे में बात करना चाहता हूँ, और उसके बाद फिर कोविड में जो जेनेटिक्स का रोल है या न्यूट्रिजिनोमिक्स का जो रोल है उसके बारे में थोड़ा सा बात करते हैं. तो आपने अभी जो स्पीकर थे डॉक्टर विमल, उनसे आपने लाइफस्टाइल डिसीजेस में जीन्स के महत्व का सुन लिया है, और ये जो डेटा है उन्होंने जो बताया कि ये जो जीनोमिक डेटा है कंबाइंड विथ एपिजेनेटिक्स. अभी एपिजेनेटिक्स का मतलब क्या है कि जो भी जीन है उसका जो म्यूटेशंस होते हैं और उसकी वजह से जो क्लिनिकल डिसीज होता है वो अंदर मतलब अंदरूनी इनसाइड द बॉडी का एनवायरनमेंट और आउटसाइड द बॉडी का एनवायरनमेंट की वजह से होता है. सो दैट एनवायरनमेंट विच अफेक्ट्स द जीन एक्सप्रेशन इज द फील्ड ऑफ एपिजेनेटिक्स. तो अगर आप जीनोमिक डेटा और एपिजेनेटिक्स को कंबाइन करेंगे तो आप, जैसे उन्होंने बोला, स्टैन ने भी दोहराया कि प्री डायबिटीज़ हो या ओबेसिटी में आप जा रहे हो या आपको हार्ट डिसीज होने वाला है या ब्लड प्रेशर आने वाला है, ये आप जान सकते हैं और उसके लिए आप पहले से ही आपका लाइफस्टाइल चेंज कर सकते हैं. तो ये जीनोमिक डेटा, एपिजेनेटिक्स, एनवायरनमेंट, लाइफस्टाइल, बैकग्राउंड, ये जो भी है ये सब इसको मल्टीफैक्टोरियल बोलते हैं, बट बेसिकली आप ये जानना जरूरी है कि टेस्टिंग के साथ ये खत्म नहीं होता है। बेसिक प्रॉब्लम क्या है, एक आपको जानना जरूरी है कि ये जो भी लाइफस्टाइल डिसीजेज हैं, लाइफस्टाइल का मतलब क्या है, आपके लाइफ का जो स्टाइल है उसकी वजह से हुआ है। तो जब तक आप लाइफ का स्टाइल कंप्लीटली चेंज नहीं करते हो, और वो चेंज परमानेंट होना चाहिए। अब किसी की शादी है तो आप वो डिजाइनर कपड़े डालने के लिए आप 5 किलो कम करते हैं 2 महीने में, फिर वो कपड़ा पिपड़ा डाल लेते हैं और फिर 2 महीने के बाद 10 किलो और बढ़ जाता है। वो वैसा उसका कोई मतलब नहीं है। आप जो भी करते हैं ये ध्यान में रखना चाहिए, ये जो भी हम अभी डिस्कस कर रहे हैं कि वो परमानेंट होना चाहिए। आप जो भी करेंगे वो हमेशा के लिए करना पड़ेगा। अगर आप कभी भी वो छोड़ देंगे तो वो जो भी प्रॉब्लम्स थे, जो आप अवॉइड करना चाहते हैं या ट्रीट करना चाहते हैं, वो वापस आ जाएंगे। तो इसके लिए लाइफस्टाइल, आपका एनवायरनमेंट मतलब फूड एंड एक्सरसाइज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज। तो न्यूट्रीजिनोमिक्स जो आपको ऑलरेडी डॉक्टर विमल ने समझाया है कि इट इज रिलेटेड टू द एक्सप्रेशन ऑफ द जीन। तो व्हाट डज इट हेल्प यू इन? इट हेल्प्स यू इन द डायग्नोसिस ऑफ डिसीज बिफोर इट अपीयर्स। इसका बहुत बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। ये आपको समझ में नहीं आएगा जो मैं बता रहा हूं, लेकिन जो स्टैन ने अभी बताया कि अगर मीटियोरोलॉजिकल डिपार्टमेंट को 2 महीने पहले मालूम हो गया कि एक साइक्लोन आने वाला है, तो उन्होंने जो तैयारी की उसकी वजह से जो पहले 10,000 लोग मरे थे तो अभी हार्डली कोई 100 भी नहीं, उससे भी कम लोग मरे हैं। तो इट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। तो आपने सिर्फ डेटा और उसका सही इस्तेमाल से 9,900 लोगों की जान बचाई है। जस्ट गिव एन एग्जाम्पल। So diagnosis of disease before it appears is very, very important. What else does it do? Because we can identify the exact gene which is at fault, and whether it has got 0, 1 or 2 expression in your body, you can increase the accuracy of the diagnosis. Now अगर आपको accuracy of diagnosis है तो आप क्या कर सकते हैं? Targeted treatment कर सकते हैं। इसका मतलब है कि अगर आपको समझो 10 डायबिटीज के लोग हैं और 10 लोगों में जीन एक्सप्रेशन अलग है, उनका रहन सहन अलग है, उनका एक्सरसाइज करने का अलग है, उनका BMI अलग है, सब अलग है, तो क्या आप एक ही डाइट देंगे क्या सबको? अभी क्या होता है, हमारे जो एलोपैथी में स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन है, मतलब वी आर इनहेरिटेड दिस प्रोटोकॉल बेस्ड अप्रोच टू डिसीज फ्रॉम द वेस्ट। तो एक एल्गोरिदम रहता है, ये हुआ तो ऐसा करो, ये करने के बाद अगर ऐसा हुआ तो ये बाजू जाओ, ऐसे हुआ तो ये बाजू जाओ, मतलब एक प्रोटोकॉल रहता है, एक प्रोग्राम रहता है, उसी के तहत आपको ट्रीटमेंट करना जरूरी होता है। हालांकि ये बहुत अच्छा है फॉर मोस्ट केसेस, लेकिन व्हेन इट कम्स टू लाइफस्टाइल डिसीजेस ये थोड़ा फेल हो जाता है, क्योंकि जो डायबिटीज का आदमी है उसका अगर जीनेटिक मेकअप अलग है और उसका एपिजेनेटिक जो इफेक्ट है उसके जीन्स पे वो अलग है, और तो वो तो अलग होने वाला ही है। तो डाइट एक ही रहने से उसका इतना इम्पैक्ट नहीं होगा उसके डायबिटीज पे। तो टारगेटेड प्रिसीजन ट्रीटमेंट के लिए आपको दोनों का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा। जेनेटिक जो टेस्ट आएंगे, डीएनए के टेस्ट, उसके बाद उनके साथ एक चर्चा करके उनका जो डाइट है, उनका जो एक्सरसाइज है, उनका जो रूटीन है डेली, उसको ध्यान में रखते हुए, मतलब वो एनवायरनमेंट लाइफस्टाइल हो गया, इसको मिला के आपको एक टारगेटेड प्लान दिया जाएगा जो डाइट भी होगा और एक्सरसाइज भी होगा। तो इससे क्या होगा कि इसका जो इफेक्ट है डाइट और एक्सरसाइज का, यू विल गेट अ बिगर बैंग फॉर योर एफर्ट, मतलब यू विल गेट मोर रिजल्ट फॉर द सेम अमाउंट ऑफ एफर्ट। अगर आप डाइट करने वाले हैं तो अच्छी तरह से डाइट करो जो आपके लिए सबसे अच्छा डाइट है, ना कि वो एक डायबिटीज का डाइट जो आप किसी मैगजीन में भी पढ़ सकते हो या बुक में भी पढ़ सकते हो। वो शायद किसी के लिए काम करेगा लेकिन सबके लिए तो काम नहीं करेगा। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज। So what is the role of nutrigenomics other than lifestyle diseases? We have it in cancer diagnosis and in psychiatry. So in cancer diagnosis हमने क्या देखा है कि with the help of genes which are रोग जीन्स, मतलब वो गंदे जीन्स हैं जिसकी वजह से कैंसर होता है, अगर किसी एक कैंसर का एक जो रोग जीन है उसको अगर हम आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हैं तो हम टारगेटेड बायोलॉजिक थेरेपी दे सकते हैं। These are called monoclonal antibodies. अभी आपने कोविड में भी सुना रहेगा tocilizumab, cerulizumab. These are monoclonal antibodies जो they act on the tumor antigen. मतलब जो इम्यून सिस्टम है उसमें वो, जैसे हमने अभी वैक्सीन लिया कोविड का, तो हमारे बॉडी में वैक्सीन लेने से एंटीबॉडी आ गया अगेंस्ट द वायरस, बराबर है ना। वैसे ही मोनोक्लोनल एंटीबॉडीज एक स्पेसिफिक कैंसर जीन के ऊपर और एंटीजन के ऊपर काम करता है। तो वो टारगेट जाके वो सिर्फ ट्यूमर डिस्ट्रॉय करता है, बाकी किसी को कुछ काम नहीं करता है, मतलब हार्म नहीं करता है। सो मोनोक्लोनल एंटीबॉडीज हैज कम एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ nutrigenetics, or not nutrigenomics but genetics in general. So it also helps to prolong the quality of life in late stage cancer. मतलब even if the cancer has gone to stage 4, जब हमने मेडिकल प्रैक्टिस शुरू किया तो स्टेज 3 और 4 हम लोग ऐसे बोलते थे कि जो है वो अच्छे से सबको बुला लो, उनको मिला दो, जो करना है खाने दो, जब जाएंगे जाएंगे। अब ऐसा नहीं है। स्टेज 4 कैंसर में भी 4, 5, 6 साल भी कभी कभी पेशेंट ये होता है, सर्वाइव होता है। और ये जो कैंसर्स है, ब्रेस्ट कैंसर, कोलोन और ब्लड कैंसर्स, इसमें खास करके बहुत सारा काम हुआ है, जीन्स आइडेंटिफाई किए गए हैं और इसलिए इनमें इसका ज्यादा से ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट है। और एक है कि जो डिप्रेशन है और एडिक्शन टू अल्कोहल, ड्रग्स, स्मोकिंग, ये जो भी है, अभी मतलब ये मालूम था पहले कि ये थोड़ा जेनेटिक भी हो सकता है। अब इसके भी जीन्स जो हैं जो उसको मतलब डिप्रेशन को लीड टू डिप्रेशन और लीड टू एडिक्शन, ये आइडेंटिफाई किए गए हैं। और एक बार जीन आइडेंटिफाई होता है तो उसमें एपिजेनेटिक्स आ जाता है, उसमें डाइट आ जाता है और उसमें साइकोलॉजिकल काउंसलिंग आ जाता है, जिससे ये अभी आप उसको कंट्रोल में रख सकते हैं आने से पहले। मतलब अगर आपको मालूम है कि आपके पास वो जीन है कि अगर आपने दारू थोड़ी भी पी तो आप उसको आगे जाके अल्कोहलिक बन सकते हैं, या ड्रग्स आपने 1-2 टाइम ट्राई किया तो आप एडिक्ट बन सकते हैं। तो आप ट्राई नहीं करना है, कितना भी पीयर प्रेशर मतलब फ्रेंड्स कितना भी बोलें, आपको नहीं करना है। अगर आपको ये पहले से जानकारी होगी तो आप करेंगे ही नहीं। और अगर आपके समझो बच्चों में भी वो हो सकते हैं तो आप इनका ट्रीटमेंट मतलब टेस्ट करके रखेंगे तो यू कैन अवॉइड देम बिकमिंग एडिक्ट्स। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड। So it is also, as I said, in cancer and in some psychiatric diseases, but also in certain inherited diseases. These inherited diseases are like, you must have heard of thalassemia, hemophilia. These are all kinds of blood related diseases जहाँ पे blood पतला हो जाता है। और वो इनहेरिटेड डिजीज की वजह से अभी हमारे शरीर में जो रेड ब्लड सेल है, जिसकी वजह से खून का रंग लाल होता है, वो 120 दिन रहता है। मतलब 120 दिन तक वो अपनी बॉडी में सर्कुलेट करता है, उसके बाद वो मर जाता है और नया सेल आता है। अब जिनको ये हीमोफीलिया या एबनॉर्मल मेटाबॉलिज्म रिलेटेड डिसीजेस रहते हैं, इसको हीमोफिलिक एनीमियाज बोलते हैं, उसमें ये 120 दिन का पीरियड कम होते जाता है, 100 दिन, 30 दिन, 60 दिन, अलग अलग डिसीजेज में। लेकिन उसका इफेक्ट क्या होता है कि लोगों में खून पतला हो जाता है और उनको कमजोरी हो जाती है और उनको बार बार खून देना पड़ता है और उनका जो भी है वो ट्रीटमेंट करना पड़ता है, कैंसर के जैसे, नॉट कैंसर बट उसके लिए जो ट्रीटमेंट है वो करना पड़ता है। अब इन डिसीजेस का भी हमने जीन्स आइडेंटिफाई किया है, तो इन ऐसे डिसीजेस को हम जड़ से उखाड़ सकते हैं अभी, मतलब बार बार ब्लड देने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती है। न्यूरोलॉजिकल डिसीज, इसमें सबसे ज्यादा एडवांस हुआ है। अब न्यूरोलॉजिकल डिसीज जैसे आपने सुना होगा अल्जाइमर्स डिसीज, जहाँ पे आदमी का दिमाग उल्टा जाता है, मतलब वो बच्चे की तरह करने लगता है उल्टा। ओके, जैसे बहुत उम्र होने के बाद हम बोलते हैं ना कि सटिया गया है आदमी, वैसे होता है। तो these neurological diseases are again like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease and certain inherited diseases, okay, like Huntington's chorea and all that. These diseases are now diagnosed with precision because we can identify the gene, जो रोग जीन है उसको आइडेंटिफाई करके उसको डीएक्टिवेट कर सकते हैं। तो ये जेनेटिक्स, न्यूट्रिजिनोमिक्स और एपिजेनेटिक्स का ये वरदान है कि बहुत सारे ऐसे डिसीजेस जो पहले ट्रीटमेंट था ही नहीं, अब उसके लिए बहुत सारा उम्मीद है। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड, नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज। या नहीं सॉरी, यस, अभी फार्माकोजिनोमिक्स क्या है? फार्माकोजिनोमिक्स जैसे न्यूट्रीजिनोमिक्स है वैसे ही है, लेकिन न्यूट्रीजिनोमिक्स में हम डाइट का इस्तेमाल करते हैं टू मैनिपुलेट द डिसीज, राइट? मतलब डायग्नोस करके उसका इलाज करने के लिए हम न्यूट्रीजिनोमिक्स का इस्तेमाल करते हैं। फार्माकोजिनोमिक्स एक नया ऑफशूट जिनोमिक्स का हो गया है, जहां पे ड्रग्स का क्या असर होता है। अब हमने देखा है कि मेटफॉर्मिन विच इज अ वेरी कॉमन ड्रग यूज्ड इन डायबिटीज, अब उसका जो इफेक्ट है टू रिड्यूस इंसुलिन रेजिस्टेंस, जिन लोगों को इंसुलिन रेजिस्टेंस होता है और उसकी वजह से डायबिटीज होता है टाइप 2, उसमें मेटफॉर्मिन इस्तेमाल करते हैं क्योंकि उनको इंसुलिन देने से भी इतना इफेक्ट नहीं आता है। लेकिन अब ये मेटफॉर्मिन का जो इफेक्ट है वो अलग अलग लोगों में अलग अलग दिखा गया। अब इसका स्टडी करने के बाद ये देखा गया कि किसी किसी को एक जीन रहता है जिससे मेटफॉर्मिन का इफेक्ट इतना अच्छा नहीं होता है, और जिसमें वो जीन नहीं है उसमें इफेक्ट अच्छा होता है। तो वैसे ही कोई भी आप अगर दवाई देते हो तो आपने देखा होगा कि एक दवाई एक आदमी को दिया, बहुत अच्छा असर आया, दूसरे आदमी को उसका रिएक्शन आ गया। ये क्यों होता है? ये इसलिए होता है कि उनका जो जेनेटिक मेकअप है उसकी वजह से कोई दवाई अच्छी लगती है, किसी को अच्छी सूट नहीं होती है। अब आपने देखा रहेगा कोई बोलता है कि मेरे को ये दवाई सूट नहीं होती है, मेरे को ये दवाई सूट नहीं होती। वो जो आप बोल रहे हैं ना, उसका जो डीप का स्टडी इस फार्माकोजिनोमिक्स, इससे क्या मालूम पड़ता है अपने को कि कौन सा दवाई किसके लिए कैसे इस्तेमाल करना है, कौन से डोज में इस्तेमाल करना है, और कम से कम डोज में सबसे ज्यादा उसका फायदा कैसे कर सकते हैं, और साइड इफेक्ट जो होता है दवाई का वो सबसे कम कैसे कर सकते हैं। तो फार्माकोजिनोमिक्स एक नया साइंस है और इसका बहुत इस्तेमाल अभी नहीं आया है रूटीन मेडिकल प्रैक्टिस में, लेकिन आने वाले समय में फार्माकोजिनोमिक्स की वजह से बहुत सारा डोसेजेस और बहुत सारा टाइप्स ऑफ ड्रग्स, अभी आपने देखा रहेगा कि ब्लड प्रेशर में बहुत सारे अलग अलग टाइप के ड्रग्स रहते हैं, तो कौन सा ड्रग किसके लिए और कौन से डोज में यूज करना जरूरी है वो ऐसे स्टडीज से मालूम पड़ेगा। क्यों कि ब्लड प्रेशर का या डायबिटीज का दवाई आपको पूरे जिंदगी लेना है, तो अगर आपको मालूम है कि कम डोज में आपको ज्यादा फायदा होगा तो वो अच्छा होगा। अब ये जो भी है, मतलब न्यूट्रीजिनोमिक्स एंड ये फार्माकोजिनोमिक्स, न्यूट्रीजेनेटिक्स इज डिपेंडेंट ऑन बिग डेटा। बिग डेटा का मतलब क्या है कि यू हैव टू डू मिलियंस ऑफ जीनोमिक सीक्वेंसेस ऑफ इंडिविजुअल पेशेंट फैक्टर्स। तो यू हैव टू क्रिएट अ डेटाबेस कि ह्यूमन जीन्स कौन से डिसीज में कैसे काम करते हैं, कौन से लाइफस्टाइल डिसीज में कौन सा जीन इंपॉर्टेंट है। जो अभी डॉक्टर विमल ने बोला कि डायबिटीज में TGL4 और ME4 और फैट में FOT एंड दूसरा लाइपोप्रोटीन में ApoE, दीज और कार्डियोवास्कुलर डिसीज में, सो दीज जीन्स आइडेंटिफाई करने के लिए ये बिग डेटा का इस्तेमाल होता है। मतलब बहुत सारे सीक्वेंसिंग करना पड़ता है टू नो व्हाट इज नॉर्मल, व्हाट इज एबनॉर्मल। जब तक आपको जो नॉर्मल है वो मालूम नहीं है तो एबनॉर्मल कैसे मालूम पड़ेगा। तो अगर आपको जीन सीक्वेंसिंग करके जिसको ब्लड प्रेशर नहीं है उनका जेनेटिक मेकअप देखो, और जिसको ब्लड प्रेशर है उनका जेनेटिक मेकअप देखेंगे, तो आपको कौन सा जीन इसमें खराब है वो मालूम पड़ेगा। तो बिग डेटा का यही मतलब होता है कि मिलियंस ऑफ रेफरेंसेस ऑफ जीनोम सीक्वेंसेस, इंडिविजुअल पेशेंट फैक्टर्स एंड फिनोटाइपिक एक्सप्रेशन। मतलब जीन जो है उसकी वजह से कौन सी बीमारी दिखती है, दैट इज कॉल्ड फिनोटाइपिक एक्सप्रेशन, ऑल कलेक्टेड एंड कोलिज्ड इनटू अ मल्टीफैक्टोरियल डेटाबेस एंड एल्गोरिथम। मतलब इसको पूरा डेटा को कंप्यूटर में डाल के उसका एल्गोरिथम करके उसमें से हम लोग उसको डेटा एनालिसिस करके मालूम कर सकते हैं कि ऐसे जीन्स में ऐसे इलाज हो सकता है, ऐसे जीन्स की वजह से ऐसा दवाई दे सकते हैं, ऐसे जीन्स की वजह से ऐसी ऐसी बीमारी हो सकती है। To compare new patient to this database to get better predictive outcomes. Next slide please. So ये big data USA में 2015 में बराक ओबामा के टाइम पे लॉन्च हुआ था। ये UK और चाइना में प्रोजेक्ट चल रहा है। ऑलरेडी 6 लाख जीनोमिक सीक्वेंसेस कर चुके हैं और इसको 60 मिलियन, मतलब मेरे को लगता है 6 करोड़ होंगे, 6 करोड़ जीनोमिक सीक्वेंसेस 2025 तक होंगे। जितना डेटा ज्यादा आएगा उतना एक्यूरेसी बढ़ता है। This database will expand and cover most diseases and help getting better outcomes with precision in diagnosis, treatment and prevention of disease. तो big data का इस्तेमाल करके we will cover more and more diseases, okay, as the time goes by. Now we come to the role of genetics in COVID-19 disease. अभी इसके बारे में आपको थोड़ा सा पहले एक बैकग्राउंड दे दूं. कोविड-19 जो है वो एक SARS-CoV-2 करके एक वायरस है जिसकी वजह से होता है. अब SARS-CoV-2 दो लोगों को लगता है, एक जन आईसीयू में जाता है और दूसरा घर में बैठ के अपने 2-3 गोली लेके आइवरमेक्टिन वगैरह लेके अच्छा हो जाता है. ये ऐसे क्यों होता है? अभी किसी ने बोला कि पहले बोलते थे वेव 1 में कि वो डायबिटीज है या उनका उम्र ज्यादा है या उनको हार्ट का प्रॉब्लम है, ऐसे लोगों को ज्यादा सीरियस होता है और ज्यादा आईसीयू में जाते हैं. लेकिन अब दिस टाइम मतलब सेकेंड वेव में ऐसे देखा गया है कि ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. इनफैक्ट यंगर लोगों को ज्यादा हो रहा है और सीरियस भी हो रहा है. जिनको कोई भी इलनेस भी नहीं है उनको भी सीरियस हो रहा है. किसी को सीरियस मतलब लगता है कि वो होम क्वारंटीन में थे और सडनली मर गए. आपने ये सब सुना होगा. अब ये क्यों हो रहा है? इसका भी एक कारण है. बिकॉज एवरीथिंग डिपेंड्स ऑन द जेनेटिक मेकअप ऑफ दैट इंडिविजुअल. सो इट अपीयर्स दैट मोर देन कोमॉर्बिडिटीज, मतलब मोर देन द एज or comorbidities, that is presence of diabetes, hypertension, etc. It is the inherent genetic makeup of the person which probably ultimately determines whether he will, come with mild disease, moderate disease, severe disease or death. Okay. So the disease susceptibility, the severity and the protective immunity, ये तीन जो बात है. मतलब डिजीज को ससेप्टेबल मतलब आपको कोरोना के पेशेंट के सामने गए, आपको कोरोना हो जाएगा कि नहीं होगा, उसको बोलते हैं ससेप्टेबिलिटी. मतलब क्या चांस है आपको कोरोना होगा. दूसरा, अगर हुआ तो कितना ज्यादा होगा, मतलब सिवियरिटी क्या होगा, बहुत ज्यादा होगा या कम होगा, माइल्ड होगा कि सीवियर होगा. और तीसरा, आपके अंदरूनी इम्यूनिटी क्या है और उसकी वजह से आपका ये पूरा आउटकम निकल जाता है. ओके, सो नेक्स्ट स्लाइड. सो ये जो हमारे बॉडी में जो जीन्स आइडेंटिफाई किए हैं ये ACE2 करके है, दैट इज एंजियोटेंसिन कन्वर्टिंग एंजाइम 2. ये मेन जीन है ACE2. ओके. दूसरा है TMPRSS2 और तीसरा है HLA और चौथा है IL-6. बाकी के भी हैं लेकिन सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट ये चार है, ACE2, TMPRESS, HLA और IL-6. अब ACE2 जो है वो ज्यादा करके लंग में रहता है, थोड़ा इंटेस्टाइन में रहता है, मतलब आंतड़ी में, और थोड़ा किडनी में रहता है. तो ये जो इस ACE2 का जो मतलब जिसमें ACE2 ज्यादा है, ओके, एक्सप्रेशन, उनको सिवियरिटी ज्यादा हो सकता है. सिमिलरली TMPRESS, ये जो जीन है जिनको ज्यादा रहता है TMPRESS, उनको ज्यादा सीवियर डिसीज हो सकता है. तीसरा, HLA में भी HLA जो है वो प्रोटेक्टिव रहता है, मतलब जिनको HLA कम रहता है एक टाइप का, उनको डिसीज ज्यादा हो सकता है और उनका इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स कम हो सकता है. और लास्ट इज IL-6. इसको आपने सुना रहेगा, इंटरल्यूकिन 6. ये जो साइटोकिन स्टॉर्म, मतलब अगर आप देखेंगे कोविड दो पार्ट्स में रहता है, पहला हफ्ता और दूसरा हफ्ता. पहला हफ्ता जो है वो माइल्ड सिम्टम्स रहते हैं, जैसे फीवर, लूज मोशंस, खांसी, वो सब. और वो जो रहता है वो वायरस जो आपके बॉडी में एंटर करके, मतलब नाक में सांस से वो आपके फेफड़े में जाके, उधर जाके ये ACE2 इनहिबिटर के थ्रू अटैच होके वो सेल्स के अंदर जाके मल्टीप्लाई करते हैं. ओके. तो वो जो क्रिया होती है उसकी वजह से बुखार आता है, खांसी होती है, एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा. ये माइल्ड डिसीज है. अब सेकेंड पार्ट जो है, सेकेंड वीक में ये IL-6 जो है वो हमारा जो इम्यून सिस्टम है उसका रिस्पॉन्स आता है वो वायरस को. और जब वो वायरस ज्यादा मात्रा में होता है तो ये IL-6 का रिस्पॉन्स हाइपर हो जाता है. और ये IL-6 अगर हाइपर हो जाता है तो वो क्या करता है कि पूरा जो फेफड़ा है उसको डिस्ट्रॉय कर देता है. वो लंग को पूरा डिस्ट्रॉय कर देता है. और उसका आपने सुना रहेगा कोविड निमोनिया. वो निमोनिया नहीं है, बेसिकली वो पूरा जो फेफड़ा का अंदर का जो लाइनिंग है उसको खराब कर देता है और उसमें पानी भर जाता है. तो ऑक्सीजन जो है, हम जब सांस लेते हैं तो जो ऑक्सीजन हमारे फेफड़े में जाता है वहां पे खून आता है, खून, और खून और फेफड़े के बीच में एक ऐसा मेम्ब्रेन रहता है, तो ऑक्सीजन खून में जाता है और सांस जब हम छोड़ते हैं तो उसमें खून का जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है वो आके सांस के बाहर आ जाता है। तो ऑक्सीजन ब्लड में जाता है और ब्लड में का जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है वो फेफड़े में आता है। वो जो एक्सचेंज होता है वो एक एकदम पतला मेम्ब्रेन रहता है। वो मेम्ब्रेन में अगर पानी भर गया तो ये एक्सचेंज नहीं हो सकता है, मतलब ऑक्सीजन सांस से जो ब्लड में जाना चाहिए और ब्लड में कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड वापस आना चाहिए वो नहीं होता है। वो नहीं होने से ऑक्सीजन का मात्रा कम होने लगता है, उसको बोलते हैं PO2 लेवल, जो आप पल्स ऑक्सीमीटर से आपकी उंगली पे देखते हैं। तो अगर वो हुआ तो बाद में आपके किसी भी ऑर्गन को ऑक्सीजन जाएगा नहीं, वो हार्ट हो या किडनी हो या लिवर हो, तो धीरे धीरे सब जो ऑर्गन्स है वो मरने लगते हैं। तो वो मल्टी ऑर्गन फेलियर होके फिर पेशेंट का डेथ होता है। तो बेसिकली ये जो जेनेटिक वेरिएंट्स है इन दीज 4 ACE2, TMPRESS, HLA एंड IL6 विल डिटरमिन कि आपको डिसीज मॉडरेट होगा, माइल्ड होगा या सीवियर होगा। सो व्हाट डू दे डू? दीज जेनेटिक वेरिएंट्स मॉड्यूलेट ससेप्टिबिलिटी, मतलब किसी का कोविड ज्यादा होने का चांस है, कम होने का चांस, वो ये जीन्स तय करते हैं। जो सिवियरिटी है, जो किसी को माइल्ड डिसीज हो गया और ठीक हो गया, किसी को सीवियर डिसीज हो गया, ये भी ये जीन्स का ये 4-5 जीन्स डिसाइड करते हैं। फिर जो सिम्टम्स आपको आएंगे वो भी ये डिसाइड करते हैं। और जो मैग्नीट्यूड ऑफ इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स है, जो मैंने बोला दूसरे हफ्ते में जो साइटोकिन स्टॉर्म आता है, जो हाइपर इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स आता है, वो ज्यादा आएगा या कम आएगा, ये भी ये 4 या 5 जीन्स तय करते हैं। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज। अभी ये हो गया होस्ट फैक्टर्स, मतलब जो हम में है। अब वायरस का क्या है? अभी जेनेटिक वेरिएंट्स ऑफ द कोविड वायरस विच एग्जिबिट बायोलॉजिकल डिफरेंस इन देयर एक्टिविटी। तो अभी इसमें 2 टाइप का है, सिंगल अमाइनो चेन एसिड म्यूटेशंस इन द स्पाइक ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन और म्यूटेशंस इन नॉन स्ट्रक्चरल एक्सेसरी प्रोटीन्स। अभी आप एक समझ लो कि वायरस जो है वो एक उसको प्रोटीन का कवर है और उसमें ऐसे नोकीले, आपने देखा रहेगा, वो एक गोल है और उसको नोकीले ऐसे कांटे जैसे, वो कांटे जो है उसको बोलते हैं स्पाइक ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन। अब उसमें जो म्यूटेशंस हो गए उसकी वजह से आपने अभी सुना रहेगा यूके म्यूटेंट, इंडियन म्यूटेंट, ब्राजील म्यूटेंट, ये स्पाइक ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन चेंज होते रहता है। उसका कॉन्फ़िगरेशन या शेप चेंज होने की वजह से वो म्यूटेट हो जाता है। तो ये जो म्यूटेशंस है वायरस के, ये स्पाइक ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन के म्यूटेशन की वजह से होते हैं। अब वायरस क्यों म्यूटेट करता है? बिकॉज उसको जीना है। उसको मालूम हो गया कि वेव 1 में जो पहला जो कोविड-19 का वायरस था उसके अगेंस्ट अभी सभी लोगों ने वैक्सीन बनाया या तो उनको इन्फेक्शन होकर एंटीबॉडीज बन गया। अब उसको सर्वाइव होने के लिए वो म्यूटेट करता है। ओके, वो ही चेंजेस। इट इज लाइक इफ यू आर डूइंग समथिंग, फॉर एग्जाम्पल जो अभी थोड़े सीनियर लोग हैं, पहले टाइपराइटर यूज करते थे, अब टाइपराइटर को यूज नहीं करता है, बाद में इलेक्ट्रॉनिक टाइपराइटर आया, बाद में कंप्यूटर आया, अभी ये कंप्यूटर आ गया तो इलेक्ट्रॉनिक टाइपराइटर हो गया। तो अगर आपने चेंज नहीं किया विद द टाइम, राइट, ऑफिस में टाइपराइटर छोड़ के आपने कंप्यूटर नहीं सीखा तो आपका जॉब चला गया, आप सर्वाइव नहीं कर सकते। तो चेंज इज द ओनली कांस्टेंट ऑफ लाइफ। Therefore, the virus also wants to survive, so it keeps mutating. And how does it mutate? By changing the configuration of the spike glycoprotein. So this can modulate these genes, ACE2, then it can modulate the TMPRESS, HLA and IL6. And because they do that, they can modulate the immune response. Okay, they can also promote immune escape. That means this mutation will cause them to escape the immune response altogether. Okay, and most important, अभी मैंने आपको बोला था monoclonal antibody जैसे tocilizumab, these are medicines which are used to treat the इंटरल्यूकिन इंड्यूस्ड साइटोकिन स्टॉर्म, मतलब जो हाइपर इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स ट्रीट करने के लिए जो मोनोक्लोनल एंटीबॉडीज हम लोग यूज करते हैं, उसका रिस्पॉन्स भी ये म्यूटेशंस की वजह से नहीं आता है। दूसरा है म्यूटेशन इन दी एक्सेसरी प्रोटीन। अभी आपने सुना रहेगा कोविशील्ड एक वैक्सीन है, कोवैक्सीन एक वैक्सीन है, मतलब भारत बायोटेक का जो वैक्सीन बना है वो है कोवैक्सीन, और कोविशील्ड है जिसका एस्ट्राजेनेका ने बनाया है। अब जो कोविशील्ड है वो ये स्पाइक ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन की अगेंस्ट है, मतलब उसको ब्लॉक करता है। ओके, तो वो स्पेसिफिक है। लेकिन ये जो बाकी के एक्सेसरी प्रोटीन्स है वो वायरस में, उसके अगेंस्ट कुछ भी नहीं है उसका इफेक्ट। लेकिन जो भारत बायोटेक का कोवैक्सीन है वो सभी प्रोटीन्स है, मतलब स्पाइक ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन और एक्सेसरी प्रोटीन्स दोनों के अगेंस्ट वो एंटीबॉडी करता है। तो ये जो एक्सेसरी प्रोटीन्स है उनका भी काम है। सो व्हाट दे डू, दे डेवलप रेजिस्टेंस टू एंटीवायरल्स। जो आपने एंटीवायरल यूज किया रेमडेसिविर वगैरह, उसके अगेंस्ट रेजिस्टेंस ये प्रोटीन्स तय करते हैं। फिर दे डिसरप्ट द इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स, बोथ टी सेल एंड डिसरप्ट सेल मीडिएटेड इम्यूनिटी, एंड दे मॉड्यूलेट द होस्ट सेल्यूलर इंटरेक्शन विद द वायरल पार्टिकल। मतलब आपका जो पूरा इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स है उसको वो चेंज कर देता है। तो इसलिए कोई लोग अभी जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल हमारे पीएम ने या हमारे सीएम ने, महाराष्ट्र का सीएम ने वो कोवैक्सीन लिया क्योंकि वो बहुत सारे म्यूटेटेड वायरसेस को भी उसके अगेंस्ट ये कर सकता है। कोविशील्ड या फाइजर का जो वैक्सीन है वो स्पेसिफिक पहले वाला जो स्ट्रेन है उसके अगेंस्ट काम करता है ज्यादा, लेकिन वो म्यूटेंट्स के इतना इफेक्टिव नहीं दिखा गया है लेकिन परसेंटेज कम है। अगर वो 90% है तो म्यूटेंट के अगेंस्ट उसका 65% इफेक्टिवनेस है। तो लेकिन सेफ्टी वाइज ये ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन वाला ज्यादा सेफ है। ओके, कोविशील्ड इज सेफर एंड दे हैव डन मोर स्टडीज अबाउट सेफ्टी, बट इफेक्टिवनेस और रेंज ऑफ इफेक्टिवनेस अगेंस्ट म्यूटेंट्स इज बेटर विद द कोवैक्सीन। इसका ये मतलब हुआ। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड। सो दिस ऑल्सो, मतलब ये जेनेटिक स्टडीज ऑल्सो हेल्प अस टू डेवलप सेंसिटिव टेस्ट। अभी आपने आरटीपीसीआर टेस्ट के बारे में सुना है, वो आरटीपीसीआर टेस्ट ऑल्सो इज बेस्ड ऑन जेनेटिक्स। You see, it tests the genetic markers of the virus because these viruses are having this chromosome 6. Okay, the DNA on the chromosome 6, it is a specific DNA on chromosome 6 of the virus which is tested by the RT-PCR test. So what it does is it allows us to detect the virus in very small quantities, and therefore even before a person becomes symptomatic we can actually detect. Sometimes you might have seen कि अरे we are surprised that our COVID test is positive, हमको symptom नहीं है, because it can detect in very small quantities. So it's a very sensitive test. And if you develop these tests, you can also develop algorithms to treat. So based on the genetic studies only, and as the disease progressed over the last 1 year, we became more and more accurate and better in trying to save the patient. If you see, first time we did not know what was the virus doing. We thought it is a pneumonia, but it was not a pneumonia. It was basically coagulation. It causes blood clots. मतलब वो रक्त का गांठ बना देता है सब जगह, not a pneumonia. तो वो ट्रीटमेंट चेंज हो गया. Okay, then we came to know कि what kind of ventilator has to be used. पहले हम लोग वेंटिलेटर यूज करते थे, but actually ventilator is counterproductive. हमको CPAP देना है और हाई फ्लो ऑक्सीजन देना है, नॉट वेंटिलेटर। मतलब ऑक्सीजन फोर्स नहीं करना है, सिर्फ बहुत सारा ऑक्सीजन एट हाई फ्लो अपने नाक के पास रखना है। दैट इज बेटर वे टू ट्रीट कोविड सीरियस पेशेंट दैन टू पुट ऑन वेंटिलेटर। सो ये जो भी ज्ञान हमको आया है, ये भी इसका भी बेसिस जेनेटिक्स ही है। तो कंक्लूजन में लास्ट स्लाइड, genomics is an exciting new field with multifactorial streams of pharmacology, engineering, nutrition, genetics. And as I've already said, and the speaker prior to me has given you an idea, that it is a predictive medicine, and therefore it is a preventive medicine, and it is a precision medicine, and it's a proactive medicine. And therefore we firmly believe, at least I firmly believe, that this is the medicine of the future, because we are treating physiology, all right, before it becomes pathology. Allopathy treats pathology and neglects physiology. That means between the normal person and the disease, there is a range of people who are in the process of developing a disease. If you can catch them early between the normal phase and the disease process, you can definitely treat it much easily and without much problem control the disease from becoming apparent. That means manifest it as a disease. That is more important than actually treating disease. Of course, treating disease is important. So with this, I conclude my talk, and if there are any questions, कोई आपका सवाल है तो मैं हिंदी में, इंग्लिश में, मराठी में बोल सकता हूँ. कोंकणी में भी बोल सकता हूँ.
Thank you, Dr. Nikhil. Beautifully, you have explained. You being a medical doctor, मैंने रिक्वेस्ट किया था सर को कि थोड़ा आप हिंदी में बोल लीजिए. थोड़ी आपकी फ्लुएंसी में थोड़ा आपको दिक्कत आई रहेगी. You would have been otherwise done it in English very beautifully. But for the benefit of Hindi speaking people, I requested you and then you have obliged. So thank you very much, Dr. Nikhil. And एक थोड़ा सा summary करें. I think what we need to understand really is that that rather than as Dr. Nikhil beautifully summarized at the end, rather than looking at a pathological situation and then treat the patient, if you can understand the physiology and then catch them before the disease comes, that's a smarter and intelligent way of treating ourselves. Now, uske liye basically chahiye, the awareness. A lot of people feel, and a classical dialogue hai ki bhai jo hoga dekha jayega kyunki marna to ek din hai hi. That mindset is there in every human being's mind, whether they are educated or whether they are even middle class or poor, irrespective of the economic strata, हर जब लोगों का ये सोच है. So I think it actually throws a lot of light and gives us a lot of confidence to the work that we are doing. और आज जितने भी लोग यहाँ पे लॉग इन हुए हैं या वेलोसिटी जेनेटिक्स के थ्रू, वेलोसिटी बूस्टर के थ्रू, जितने भी लोग हम लोग जेनेटिक्स के लोगों तक बात करते हैं, we are actually speaking about a future medicine जो मेन स्ट्रीम रूटीन मेडिकल वर्ल्ड में अभी आने की बाकी है. So that means we are far ahead of a lot of contemporary people. So that was really good. I think we can have around 2-3 questions if somebody wants to ask questions, and
they can ask in Hindi, not a problem.
हाँ, हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं.
Comfortable in Hindi. I mean, I want to just comment that I could have probably given a little more better presentation in English, because talking of genetics in Hindi is a little, but I think I managed it. I think
you were quite good. So anybody would like to ask question? अभी हिंदी में आप पूछोगे तो हमको पढ़ना भी थोड़ा मुश्किल होगा. निखिल सर, महत्वपूर्ण जानकारी के हिंदी में कहने के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. क्या बात है. राजीव नेमा आपने बोला थैंक यू वेरी मच. So yeah, of course, you can all thank and I'm sure you really appreciate your acknowledgement. If you have 2 people or 3 maximum questions we can allow, अगर आपको पूछना हो. Any questions? Otherwise we move on to the next session. Okay. Yeah. Any questions we have? All right. So कभी आपको लगता रहेगा कि थोड़ा जेनेटिक्स टफ सब्जेक्ट है. It's a very simple subject. अगर आपको बेसिक चीजें समझ में आ जाएंगी कि as even in our presentations हम लोग बताते हैं कि हम लोग कुछ भी करें, कुछ भी चेंज हो जाए, हमारे बायोलॉजिकल फादर एंड मदर को हम लोग चेंज नहीं कर सकते हैं. सो हमारे पेरेंट्स तो वही हैं, तो उनके जरिए जो उनके 2 अलग अलग फैमिलीज के जो जीन्स आए हुए हैं वो तो हमारे सेम है, तो वो जीन्स का एक्सप्रेशन भी डेफिनेटली होगा. एंड उसका एक्सप्रेशन का जीन को बरकरार, मतलब एक तरीके से कंट्रोल रखने के लिए, फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आपके गाड़ी में एक एक्सेलरेटर भी है और एक ब्रेक भी है, एक्सेलरेटर बहुत ज्यादा दबा देंगे और आप कंट्रोल नहीं कर पाएंगे, क्रैश हो जाएगा, एक्सीडेंट हो जाएगा. लेकिन आपके पास एक ब्रेक भी दिया हुआ है इसको कंट्रोल करने के लिए. तो एपिजेनेटिक्स के जरिए आप आपके जेनेटिक्स के जो जीन एक्सप्रेशन में जो रोग जीन्स के जरिए आपके जो एक्सप्रेशन हो सकते हैं उसको आप कंट्रोल कर सकते हैं. दैट इज योर genetic insights and corresponding action plan. So there's one question that somebody is asking, saying how would be the effect effect on the children. I'm not too sure whether he's asking of the COVID or genetic, but maybe a question related to how the impact, because third wave will impact the children करके जो बता दिया है. So what do you think is the realistic picture?
Yeah, so the first thing is you have to understand that in the first wave they said that older people are going to be more susceptible. That is also because the genetic makeup allows susceptibility to this infection because of the genes aging. Okay, and it is a little complicated to explain in Hindi, but I will say that because of the genetic makeup which changes with age, the older people are more susceptible, which means that younger people are less susceptible. Second, the younger people do not have the kind of immune response which is seen in adults. वो जो cytokine storm होता है, it is more in adults. not in children, the cytokine storm. And it is the cytokine storm or the hyperimmune response which kills the person, not the COVID. Not the COVID. Because what happens is the genes which are basic, आपको एक समझना है कि जो जीन है जो इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स करता है वही जीन अगर हाइपर एक्सप्रेस हो गया, ज्यादा एक्सप्रेस हो गया, तो वो इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स ज्यादा हो जाता है. तो किसमें इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स ज्यादा होगा या नहीं होगा ये कोई नहीं बता सकता है जब तक वो होता है. ओके, अब ये जो जीन्स है वो बच्चों में ये हाइपर इम्यून रिस्पॉन्स इतना नहीं होता है. इट इज नॉट सीन. देयरफॉर वी डू नॉट एक्सपेक्ट children to die. We do not expect children to die. They will get COVID, but they will not die of COVID. That is the expectation. And why the children will get in the wave 3? You have to understand this. In wave 2, which is the most devastating wave in any pandemic, most of the people who were to get COVID have got it. The first wave affected elderly people and comorbidity. Second wave has affected younger people. Second thing is vaccination is going on. So a large population of the people will have resistance to the infection by that time, which means all over 18. So रहते कौन है? Who is remaining? Only children. That is why they are saying it will affect children. It is not that it is something that the virus will only go to the children. ऐसा नहीं है. But the children are the ones who have rather not got COVID or they have not been vaccinated. That is why they are more susceptible in third wave. That's the only thing. And it is going to be the smallest and the least fatal wave amongst all. And that has been seen in the last 2 pandemics, whether it is Spanish flu or plague. The third wave is more of a epidemic at localized places rather than the whole country being affected. And I don't think that it will end up in lockdown.
Okay. Doctor, Rishwadkar is our one of the youngest students, 78 years only. So he's asking this, कि genetic test इतना useful होने के बावजूद भी why are the medical world is still not sort of aware about this, about the benefits of genetic test, predictive test?
Yeah, because our education in this, when we were doing our MBBS, genetics was only one question. Okay, one section of biochemistry, one section. It has only become more and more now. Second thing is genetics is considered as a basic science. मतलब anatomy, physiology, pathology, pharmacology, okay, forensic medicine, genetics. These come under basic sciences of medicine. They are not clinical sciences like medicine, surgery, gynecology, orthopedics, ENT, ophthalmology, etc. So people don't pay much attention to it. Second thing is most of the practicing doctors today do not have much of a background of genetic studies. It needs a very concentrated and focused study outside the clinical medicine. That is the main reason why the clinical studies, the people who are into clinical studies say, "Arey ye kaun sab karega?" Aisa. The attitude is like that. And third is, I am doing, अभी जो मैं कर रहा हूँ वो ठीक है ना, पेशेंट्स ठीक हो रहे हैं ना, अभी क्यों मगजमारी करने का, जेनेटिक्स सीखने का ये एज में? That is the resistance to change. जैसे कंप्यूटर पहले आए तो सब लोग हड़ताल पे गए बैंक में कि हम कंप्यूटर आएगा तो हमारा काम जाएगा वगैरह. It's not like that. You have to embrace the change. If you embrace the change, so gradually it take time, but maybe in 4 or 5 years it will happen. Just like driverless cars will replace human-driven cars over the next 5 years, internal combustion engine cars will go and all electric cars will come. Same way, genetics will become a part of mainstream clinical medicine and in the future. It will. It is on its way. You don't see it. It's an underneath the wave. No, it's like a wave below. वो बाद में वो सुनामी हो जाता है, ऐसा आएगा, तब दिखता है. अब वो under the surface है. Right now, genetics is being studied more in laboratories and people like Dr. Vimal who are focused genetics specialists. But it has not entered clinical medicine. It will enter clinical medicine. It will have to enter clinical medicine because it will shift from treating pathology to physiology.
Perfect.
And the public will make. And people like Stan and others who are promoting this, when there is what is called as a critical mass of population comes to know about this, then the pressure of the people itself will make the doctors study it or utilize it in their practice. It's on its way. It's not that it's discarded. It's on its way. It's yet not become common knowledge.
Absolutely. So I think, at this juncture, I also want to tell you the contribution Dr. Nikhil does to our ecosystem, Velocity Genetics, Vignet ke liye is really, really appreciable. In fact, there are two things that I want to tell you about Dr. Nikhil. Myself and Dr. Nikhil together are working on, the effects of, or rather, a certificate course in pharmacogenomics, and this will be aimed to doctors. Just imagine a non-medical person talking about pharmacogenomics to the medical world, and that's the revolution that we need to bring in. तो इसके लिए आप सभी लोग हैं. अगर आप ये सोचते हैं कि हम लोग layman है, simple and doctor ही सब कुछ है, नहीं. That's one stream of medicine, and if you see, it's like using a little, not a typewriter, but of course maybe a desktop. But अभी desktop का जमाना नहीं है. अभी laptop है, tabs हैं, smartphones हैं. So I think sometimes you might get this feeling saying that some of the systems, or rather some of the solutions that we are getting, may be slightly outdated. And as Dr. Nikhil rightly said, that genetics में बहुत कुछ पढ़ना है. आपको अगर अपना report भी देखना है, it's around 250 pages. First thought that will come कि यार ये इसको कौन पढ़ेगा? So that means, human psychology is to be always in the comfort zone. मेहनत या effort हमको करना नहीं होता है. So we want quick fix solutions. So allopathy actually to a great extent answers that. There's absolutely nothing wrong. I think the pathological stream of medicine may the breakthroughs that I've done is tremendous. So we are not going to get into any controversial statement by saying that this is good or that is not so good. But what I'm saying is, or rather what our stand is, that when genetics, हम लोग अपने presentations भी कहते हैं, when it is complementing the mainstream treatment method, the effect, or rather efficacy of the treatment is more accurate, more targeted is what we're doing. So Dr. Nikhil is now taking a lot of leadership in educating the medical fraternity, doctors in the world of pharmacogenomics. क्योंकि लोग उनके पास जो आते हैं, patients जो आते हैं, उनको सही दवा देने के लिए doctors के लिए genetic insights की जरूरत है. I really want all of you to acknowledge this initiative and effort by Dr. Nikhil very soon. Due to lockdown, थोड़ा सा हमारा delay हुआ है, but then very soon we'll come out with this pharmacogenomics, where of course not you, but qualified medical doctors will be involved. That's one. Second, Dr. Nikhil also has been taking initiative to do a PhD in genetics with the Indian data. और ऐसे doctors बहुत कम हैं. So he has already taken some progress, some work on that. So thank you very much, Dr. Nikhil Baljekar, for being there with us all the time. In spite of a busy schedule as a medical doctor, practitioner, you'll be getting a lot of calls even during the session. Maybe people want to speak to you. And ये दौरान में भी वो काफी charity या free medicine treatment surgery वगैरह कर लेते हैं. So let's wave all our hands once again, all of you whoever are there in the video. Once again, thank you so much on behalf of everybody here. And we are all warriors of genomic wellness. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave now, Stan. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. So अब एक आप सब लोगों के लिए सवाल है. डॉक्टर निखिल बलजेकर ने बहुत अच्छी तरीके से कहा कि आपके लंग्स में किस तरीके से फेफड़ों में जब कोरोना वायरस जाता है तो किस तरीके से नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट करता है. So I want to do an online COVID test right now. How many of you are ready? Online COVID test. इधर ही बैठे. Are you all ready? Yes, no? So please chat and then tell me if you're ready. We'll do an online COVID test right now. This is a free offer to all of you, all the people. Ready? Let's, it's magic. Are you ready? Yes or no? सब डर गए कि भाई RT-PCR में किधर पॉजिटिव आ गया तो क्या करें अभी सेशन से रिमूव किया जाएगा. Not really. Okay, so I'll play a small video. All that you need to do is just sit in the right posture. अच्छी तरीके से posture में बैठ लीजिए, and you'll have to breathe and you'll have to check the strength of your lungs. I'm sure these kind of videos are then been circulating in the WhatsApp space. So what is written there is you need to take a deep breath. ठीक है, जब 5 से काउंटडाउन स्टार्ट हो जाएगा 5 4 3 2 1 0 होने तक आपने आपका ब्रेथ होल्ड करना है, एंड द बॉल दैट इज सीन हियर विल बी रिवॉल्विंग इन द सर्कल. सो अगर आपने 2 राउंड तक आपका सांस बनाए रखा, होल्ड किया, तो यू गॉट नॉर्मल लंग्स. अगर आपने 5 राउंड्स तक किया, यू गॉट स्ट्रॉन्ग लंग्स. एंड अगर 10 तक किया, यू आर लाइक अ सुपर ह्यूमन लंग्स. मतलब बहुत अच्छे एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी लंग्स है आपके. सो आर यू ऑल रेडी? यस. So let me just start the video. Hold the breath only when the number comes to 0. Okay, here we go. So it's 3, 2, 1, and hold. Okay, so write your scores now. You can write 5, 6, okay? Good, some of you are good at 5. Some people are writing 10, difficult to believe. It's very difficult. But if you're 10, no, nothing like it. ऐसे आप मतलब ऐसे मत लिखो, just write 12. Somebody is writing 12. 3 बार किया रहेगा अपने साथ में. Okay, so this video probably you can find somewhere else, and then you can make it available. Just check your lungs. These are all simple things that we can do. This is not a great COVID test. I was just kidding. This is just to understand your lungs capacity, lungs ki strength, so that you can assess your own fitness. And there are so many things that are available in various streams of medicine, whether it's yoga, whether it is Zumba, whether it is any other stream of exercise that you can do. Okay, so great. Now हम लोगों ने देखा कि भाई nutrigenomics is something that's related with food, nutrition, and also lifestyle modifications. And we need to really understand that lockdown के दौरान कई सारे लोगों के weight बढ़ गए हैं. The sleep patterns have been completely changed. All this has happened simply because we are, probably not having the right, lifestyle which we ideally should be having. So today, one of the things that we are really confronting is, of course, the essential product are being sold. So we, the fruits, vegetables, grains, and every other thing is available. But normal times जैसा नहीं है. So sometimes हम लोग ऐसा देखते हैं कि भाई मतलब लॉकडाउन में से फ्रस्ट्रेशन होके ऐसा पूछते हैं कि भाई करें तो क्या करें. और कई बार घर वालों को हम लोग ये भी पूछते हैं कि भाई खाएं तो क्या खाएं, कि वही खाना पड़ रहा है, सेम फूड पैटर्न एटसेट्रा. सो ऐसा दिमाग करने की जरूरत नहीं है. We're going to talk about the foods that we need to take, the nutrition that we need to take during the lockdown time. So to do this session, or a quick session, we have somebody very special who has been into the field of nutrition and dietetics. So she's done her MSc in nutrition and dietetics. She is also a certified pediatric nutrition. तो जो third wave में बच्चों के लिए अगर आप concern रखते हैं, she will be somebody who will be giving us insights as to what could be the right food combination for our children. She is also a certified nutrigenomic counselor. So genetic counseling करके उनका diet plan बनाना, उनके lifestyle में क्या modification करना है, वो सिखाना उनका profession है. For the last 10 years, she is working as a genomic based nutritionist, and right now she is the head nutrigenomics department of gene support from Pune. This is the leading lab from Pune. So I'd like to, with the waving of your hands, welcome Miss Aditi Dev Sarkar for the next session on the foods that we need to consume during the lockdown. So Aditi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stan. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. Am I audible? Firstly, yes. I would like to just test.
Yes, you are.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, सबको a very good afternoon. I'm sure आप लोग का very important time निकाल के आप लोग ये session attend कर रहे हो, and I'm sure कि session के end तक आप लोग बहुत insights of the entire genetics ये सब आपको पता चल जाएगा. उसको कैसे implement करना चाहिए छोटे-छोटे day to day lifestyle में, ये आप लोग काफी अच्छे से इसको जान लेंगे. इससे पहले के सेशंस में जो स्पीकर्स उससे पहले जिन्होंने बात कर रहे थे उन्होंने आप लोगों को एक बहुत अच्छा इंसाइट इन न्यूट्रिजिनोमिक्स या फिर जेनेटिक्स रिलेटेड मेडिकल एस्पेक्ट, जेनेटिक्स रिलेटेड कुछ थिंग्स विच यू शुड डू करना चाहिए, कुछ थिंग्स नहीं करना चाहिए, आप लोगों को बहुत अच्छी तरह से समझाया। तो मेरा सेशन जो रहेगा ये बेसिकली फोकस्ड रहेगा कि जेनेटिक्स का आप यूटिलाइजेशन रेगुलर ईटिंग फूड्स या फिर आपका डाइट में कैसे यूटिलाइज कर सकते हो एंड उसका इम्पोर्टेंस क्या है। सो मैं अपना स्क्रीन शेयर करती हूँ, मेरा छोटा पीपीटी है जिसके थ्रू मैं एक्सप्लेन करने की कोशिश करूंगी कि जीन्स कैसे इंपॉर्टेंस होता है डाइट एंड न्यूट्रिशन में, या फिर हम जब बात करते हैं इम्यूनिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में या फिर हेल्दी रहने के लिए, तो न्यूट्रिशन कैसे इम्पैक्ट करता है। सो मैं फिनिश करती हूँ एंड देन आई विल ट्राई टू एक्सप्लेन और आई विल ट्राई टू गिव आंसर्स टू ऑल द क्वेरीज व्हिच यू विल बी हैविंग इट।
Aditi, if you could put your microphone a little closer, that's that's fine.
All right. Okay. So of course हम लोग बहुत ही एक अनसर्टेन टाइम के थ्रू गो थ्रू कर रहे हैं जहाँ पे वी आर ऑल एट होम। फिटनेस एज इट इज पहले लोग नहीं करते थे, मतलब फिटनेस वाज अ प्रायोरिटी। फिटनेस आप तभी करते हो जब आपको एक किसी फंक्शन में टिपिकली जाना होता है या फिर आपको किसी एक पर्टिकुलर क्लोथ्स में फिट इन होना होता है, तभी हम फिटनेस को सोचना चालू करते हैं। बट ये हम नहीं समझते दैट फिटनेस इज अ पार्ट ऑफ अ लाइफ, ये हमारे एवरी डे का पार्ट होता है। आप जैसे रोज खाना खाते हो या फिर आप जैसे रोज सोते हो या फिर आप जैसे आपका रेगुलर रूटीन फॉलो करते हो, फिटनेस भी वैसा ही है। एंड फिटनेस में डाइट एक्सरसाइज बहुत बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर रोल प्ले करता है। अभी न्यूट्रिजिनोमिक्स या फिर जीन बेस्ड एक टूल होने का फायदा ये होता है कि आप एग्जैक्टली फाइंड आउट कर सकते हो कि क्या करना चाहिए। बिकॉज हम एज अ ह्यूमन बीइंग बहुत काफी चूजी होते हैं कि कभी हम बोलते हैं फिटनेस में या फिर हमको अगर फिट रहना है, मुझे सिर्फ 5 kg लूज करना है, 5 kg लूज करने के लिए मैं सिर्फ वॉकिंग करूंगा, इसके ऊपर मुझे नहीं करना है बिकॉज मैं बहुत ज्यादा लेजी बन रहा हूँ या फिर मेरे पास टाइम नहीं हो रहा है या फिर मैं उसको समझ नहीं पा रहा हूँ कि वो कितना इंपॉर्टेंट है मेरे लाइफ में। ये सब मेनी फैक्टर्स एंड रीजनिंग्स होते हैं जिसकी वजह से फिटनेस तभी आता है जब एक अलार्मिंग बेल लगने लगता है या फिर जब हमको लगता है कि हाँ दिस इज द रेड अलार्म, रेड फ्लैग और अभी हमको कुछ करना चाहिए। सो जीन बेस्ड
Aditi, if you could make it full screen.
Okay. So COVID-19 एंड न्यूट्रिशन में पिछले 2 साल में 1.5 साल में हमने काफी कुछ सुना है कि न्यूट्रिशन बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। ऑल ऑफ अ सडन जो लोग कभी फिटनेस जिंदगी में कभी किसी ने किया भी नहीं था, किसी को पता भी नहीं था कि इम्यूनिटी या फिर फिटनेस कैसा इंपॉर्टेंट होता है, ऑल ऑफ अ सडन विद इन वन फाइन डे सबने काढ़ा पीना चालू कर दिया है। फिर आप घर पे जाके सब जंक बंद कर देते हो, आप पानी पीना चालू कर देते हो, आप बहुत कुछ अलग सिस्टम्स कर रहे हो। क्यों कर रहे हो? एक फियर है कि मुझे कोविड-19 नहीं होना चाहिए, या फिर इनकेस मुझे बाई चांस कोविड-19 होता है, मैं अपने आप को उस पर्टिकुलर कंसर्न से बहुत इजीली प्रिवेंट या बहुत इजीली मैनेज गो थ्रू कर सकूं। सो इसीलिए लोगों ने बहुत ज्यादा रैंडमाइजली न्यूट्रिशन का एप्लीकेशन करा, विच इज अगेन अ ब्लेसिंग इन डिस्गाइज ऑफ कोर्स। एटलीस्ट वी हैव स्टार्टेड अंडरस्टैंडिंग दैट न्यूट्रिशन इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इन आवर लाइफ एंड इट इज एज इंपॉर्टेंट एज जैसे सोना या फिर सांस लेना जितना इंपॉर्टेंट है, रोज हेल्दी एंड रोज का गुड फूड, डाइट फूड खाना भी, विच इज वेरी या गुड फूड फॉर दैट मैटर, इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। So yes, COVID-19 में one of the primary thumb rule which पहले के speakers ने भी बोल के गए हैं या फिर आप लोगों को explain किया है, that nutrition, अच्छा न्यूट्रिशन हम जितना करेंगे या फिर अपने सिस्टम में जितना अच्छा खाना पीना हम खा पाएंगे, जितना हेल्दी हम रह पाएंगे, हम कोविड-19 को बेटर फाइट कर सकते। दैट इज द सिंपल एंड द सिंपलेस्ट थंब रूल ऑफ कोविड-19 और ऑफ द लाइफ। सो अगर आपको कोविड-19 से बेटर मैनेज होना है या फिर कोविड-19 को बेटर ये करना है, डाइट आपको करना ही पड़ेगा। सो आप डाइट इन द सेंस, जब मैं डाइट बोलते डज नॉट मीन कि आप ये मत खाइए वो मत खाइए, इट्स अबाउट द हेल्दी फूड। ये आपको करना ही पड़ेगा, ऑप्शंस इसमें कुछ सच है नहीं। सो नाउ so in this 2 years हमने काफी कुछ सुना है, it is all about immunity. So immunity, अभी हर every second बंदा immunity बोलता है। So we all say that कि हाँ immunity आपको ठीक करना है तब जाके आप COVID-19 से बच पाओगे, या फिर immunity अगर better होगा आप उसको better way में उसको manage कर पाएंगे। So immune system actually होता क्या है and वो क्या and why healthy foods and why all of a sudden लोगों ने काढ़ा पीना चालू कर दिया या फिर लोगों ने विटामिन सी के टैबलेट्स खाना चालू कर दिया. मतलब विटामिन सी पहले I remember I'll just share one of my anecdotes. पहले जब मैं कंसल्टेशन करती थी तो मुझे विटामिन सी सप्लीमेंटेशन अगर मुझे किसी पेशेंट को बोलना होता था तो मुझे उसको 10 रीजनिंग्स देने होते थे कि क्यों विटामिन सी इंपॉर्टेंट है आपके डाइट में, आपको क्या इंपॉर्टेंट है क्या नहीं इंपॉर्टेंट. बट द चेंज इज अगेन व्हिच इज अ ब्लेसिंग इन डिसगाइज दैट इन लास्ट 2 years विटामिन सी मुझे I just have to, even if I don't write, अगर मुझे किसी प्रेस्क्रिप्शन में विटामिन सी नहीं भी लिखना होता है, पेशेंट मुझे पूछते हैं कि आप विटामिन सी आपने क्यों नहीं लिखा, विटामिन सी इंपॉर्टेंट है. So that's how it is important. So people are starting understanding that immunity system and certain nutrient आपके immune system को better करता है, enhance करता है, which is very very necessary. So likewise, immune system is a very complex network of cells and proteins that of course defends body against infection. So अगर हमारा body किसी भी infection, not just COVID-19, beat any infection, it is the immune system जो पहले first defense में आता है और आपके body को first level of protection देता है. So इम्यूनिटी करने के लिए हमको क्या करना चाहिए? इम्यूनिटी करने के लिए हमको एक थंब रूल है, हमको गुड हेल्थ मैनेज या मेंटेन करना पड़ेगा थ्रू एंड थ्रू. और सो कुछ फैक्टर्स होते हैं जो इम्यूनिटी को एनहांस कर सकते हैं या फिर इम्यूनिटी को गिरा सकते हैं. फैक्टर्स जैसे इम्यूनिटी को एनहांस कर सकते हैं इज लाइक हेल्दी खाना, अच्छे से नींद कंप्लीट होना, स्लीप इज प्रॉपर, स्ट्रेस कम लेना, एक्सरसाइज गुड रेगुलर एक्सरसाइज करते रहना. तो ये सब थिंग्स अगर हम ऑन एंड ऑफ रेगुलर बेसिस में हम करते रहते हैं तो इम्यूनिटी तो सडनली कोविड-19 आने पे हमको अलग से काढ़ा पीने की जरूरत नहीं है या फिर सडनली हमको अलग से जाके विटामिन सी के सप्लीमेंटेशंस उठा के मतलब लॉट ऑफ थिंग करने की जरूरत नहीं. अगर इन केस इफ वी हैव डन ऑल दिस थिंग थ्रू एंड थ्रू और पैरेलली अच्छे से हमने किया हुआ, लेकिन अगर हम नहीं करते, व्हिच इज अनफॉर्चुनेट दैट मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन फॉल्स इनटू द सेकंड कैटेगरी, दैट हम ये फॉलो नहीं कर पाते. हम इम्यूनिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में या फिर लाइफस्टाइल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में तभी इम्पैक्ट करते हैं तो जब हमको करना पड़ता है, जब हम सोचते हैं कि अभी करना जरूरी है या फिर अभी नेसेसरी, अभी नहीं किया तो फिर मुझे डॉक्टर अगले सेशन में डेफिनेटली डांटने वाला है या फिर कुछ बोलने वाला है तो मुझे अभी देखना पड़ेगा, तब हम इम्यूनिटी के बारे में सोचना चालू करते हैं. सो टू मेंटेन अ बैलेंस ऑफ इम्यून सिस्टम, गुड बैलेंस ऑफ डाइट एंड एक्सरसाइज इज अ मैंडेटरी. ये लाइफ का मोटो है, ये लाइफ का इम्पोर्टेंस है, ये लाइफ में हमको कैसे भी करके एज सच अभी मूविंग फॉरवर्ड पोस्ट कोविड पैंडेमिक टाइम ऑल्सो इम्यूनिटी इज समथिंग जिसको हमको हमारे लाइफ में लाना ही होगा, चाहे नेक्स्ट पैंडेमिक का वेट हम करें या ना करें. अगर ये करते तो वी विल नॉट हैव टू बी स्कैर्ड अबाउट कि हमको क्या सेशन क्या बाद में क्या करना चाहिए क्या नहीं करना चाहिए. सो जीन्स एंड इम्यूनिटी कैसे करता है? सो जीन्स एंड इम्यूनिटी का इम्पैक्ट क्या होता है? सो जैसे कि आपने सुना होगा या फिर आपने जाना लर्न किया होगा पहले सेशन में कि जीन्स सब कुछ बेसिकली डिसाइड करता है, विच इज एब्सोल्युटली राइट. जीन्स ऐसा चीज है जो एक ह्यूमन बीइंग का सब कुछ डिसाइड करता है कि आप एक बंदे का हाइट कैसा होना चाहिए, एक बंदे का बालों का कलर क्या होना चाहिए, आईज कलर क्या होना चाहिए, ये सब कुछ हमारा जेनेटिक्स डिसाइड करता है. सो न्यूट्रिजेनोमिक्स जो साइंस होता है, जो स्टडी ऑफ जीन्स होता है, उसमें वो जीन्स पिकअप किए जाते हैं जिसमें कुछ मैनिफेस्टेशन करने पे, चेंजेस करने पे आपको डेफिनेट डिफरेंस दिखता है एंड आप उसको एक पर्सनलाइज्ड लेवल पे यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं. Now, genes and immunity, it is a study which shows immune response determined by a genes कि हमारा immunity respond कैसा करेगा. जैसे सर कुछ genes के बारे में description दे रहे थे, कुछ number of genes, तो वैसे बहुत सारे body में genes होते हैं जो हर एक gene का अलग अलग functions होते हैं. जो genes immunity के साथ associated होता है वो बताता है कि अगर वो gene अच्छा है या फिर अगर वो gene बुरा है या mutated नहीं है, उसके बेसिस में एक बंदे का इम्यूनिटी रिस्पॉन्स कैसा होना चाहिए. तो अगर मुझे पता चलता है कि हाँ जीन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में कि इम्यूनिटी रिस्पॉन्स पुअर है तो मुझे एक रेड फ्लैग आता है एज ए न्यूट्रिशन कंसल्टेंट कि मुझे उसके लाइफस्टाइल या डाइट में बहुत सारे फूड या इम्यूनिटी बेस्ड फूड इंक्रीज करना पड़ेगा. तो वहां पे पर्सनलाइजेशन स्टार्ट हो जाता है. तो पर्सनलाइजेशन स्टार्ट होने पे तब मैं एग्जैक्टली फिगर आउट हम कर पाते हैं कि उसमें कौन सा न्यूट्रिएंट, इम्यूनिटी में भी बहुत सारे न्यूट्रिएंट होते हैं. सो आउट ऑफ ऑल दिस न्यूट्रिएंट कौन सा न्यूट्रिएंट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, किसको कितना प्रमाण में देना है और कौन से किस न्यूट्रिएंट को कितना कम में देना है, ये हमको जेनेटिक्स बहुत पर्सनलाइज्ड लेवल पे समझा देता है. New research reveals nearly 3/4 of immune traits are influenced by the genes. Defense against infection is is a complex system based system shaped by the contributors of multiple genes and an environmental factors. So next is about nutrigenomics and strong immunity. So again, nutrigenomics is a tool which uses genetic information to build immunity with right focus on कुछ aspects such as immunity and vascular health, heart condition, vascular health condition. ये कैसा है? Calorie management, oxidative stress, vitamins, इन्फ्लेमेशन, डिटॉक्सिफिकेशन एंड एक्सरसाइज मैनेजमेंट. ये हर एक सेगमेंट का मैं आगे जाके एक्सप्लेन करने वाली हूँ. बट अदरवाइज न्यूट्रिजेनोमिक्स इम्यूनिटी में कैसे इंपैक्ट करता है? सो न्यूट्रिजेनोमिक्स एक सिंपल फंडा है. न्यूट्रिजेनोमिक्स अगर मैं टेस्ट करती हूँ, मुझे एक बंदे का पर्सनलाइज्ड एस्पेक्ट पता चलता है. जैसे अभी जब पैंडेमिक स्टार्ट हुआ था तो हर किसी ने, जैसे मैंने बोला कि इम्यूनिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में विटामिन सी, कारा, फ्रूट जूस, वेजिटेबल सब कुछ हर कोई खाना चालू कर दे. लेकिन अभी प्रॉब्लम ऐसा भी देखा गया, जब मैं पोस्ट पैंडेमिक कंसल्टेशन कर रही थी या फिर इन द पैंडेमिक कंसल्टेशन कर रही थी, मेनी पीपल केम अप विद कंप्लेंट्स सच एज कि मुझे गैस्ट्राइटिस का कंसर्न हो चुका है, या फिर मुझे डाइजेशन प्रॉपर्ली नहीं हो रहा है, आईबीएस का प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है, बार बार डायरिया हो जा रहा है, ये हो जाए. तो जब हम बैकग्राउंड में जाके चेक किए, हमने चेक करना चालू किया कि ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है, तब जाके हमको आइडेंटिफाई हुआ कि इम्यूनिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में जब क्लाइंट्स ऑब्वियसली पेशेंट्स से बात हम करते हैं तो हमको पता चलता है कि क्या होता है. तो जब बात करने लगते हैं तब हमको समझ में आता है कि इम्यूनिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में, जस्ट बिकॉज कि पूरा मार्केट, मीडिया ये सब इम्यूनिटी पे बात कर रहे हैं, तो उन लोगों ने इम्यूनिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में सब कुछ खाना चालू कर दिया. सो मच सो दैट कि वेजिटेबल्स, फ्रूट जूसेस, रॉ कारा, उसको ठीक से पकाया है या नहीं पकाया है, व्हाटसएवर इट इज, बट कॉन्सेप्ट ये हो गया था कि सब खाना है. अभी प्रॉब्लम ऐसा हुआ कि सब खाने के चक्कर में बाकी कोई दूसरा कॉम्प्लिकेशन कंसर्न्स आना चालू हो गया, लूज मोशंस, लैक ऑफ स्लीप या बाकी और जो भी कंसर्न एसोसिएटेड है, ये सब प्रॉब्लम्स आना चालू हो गए. सो यहाँ पे न्यूट्रिजेनोमिक्स बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, क्योंकि न्यूट्रिजेनोमिक्स टूल से, मतलब जेनेटिक्स टूल से मैं एग्जैक्टली आइडेंटिफाई कर पाएंगे कि अगर मुझे या फिर किसी कंसल्टेंट को एक बंदे का इम्यूनिटी सिस्टम अप करना है, उसको कौन से एरियाज में, कौन से पर्टिकुलर एरियाज में फोकस करना चाहिए, कौन सा फूड कितना खाना चाहिए, कौन सा फूड नहीं खाना चाहिए. ऐसा हो सकता है जब हम आपका जेनेटिक्स टेस्ट करें, जिसमें से हमको पता चलता है कि आपका रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ विटामिन सी ज्यादा है बट एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी कम है. तो एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी मतलब होता है ये ओमेगा 3, या फिर आप लोग जब हम सीड्स वगैरह खाते हैं, इसका ये एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी होता है. सो अगर मुझे पता चलता है कि एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी रिक्वायरमेंट कम है और मुझे एंटी ऑक्सीडेंट या विटामिन सी रिक्वायरमेंट इंक्रीज करना है, या विटामिन मिनरल्स, तो मैं टिपिकली विटामिन सी या विटामिन रिलेटेड न्यूट्रिएंट पे फोकस करूंगी. मुझे एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी के ड्रग्स या एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी के सप्लीमेंटेशन देके किसी बंदे को ओवरलोड नहीं करना है, क्योंकि वो नेसेसरी नहीं है. वो जेनेटिक्स से पता चलता है कि वो आदमी जब तक अपना रेगुलर रोज का फूड हेल्दी वे में खाएगा, वो मेंटेन कर लेगा, उसको एडिशनल सपोर्ट ऑफ सप्लीमेंटेशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगा. लेकिन हाँ, अगर विटामिन सी के जीन्स म्यूटेटेड है तो मुझे बोलना पड़ेगा कि हाँ, आपका विटामिन वाला सी जो जीन है, जो जीन एसोसिएट करता है, ये वीकर है. इसका मतलब है आप चाहे कितना भी फ्रूट वेजिटेबल्स रेगुलर सोर्स में खाओ, आपका अब्जॉर्प्शन कम हो रहा है. तो इधर मुझे आपको क्वांटिटी फूड ऑफ टाइप्स में इंक्रीज करना पड़ेगा, या फिर मुझे आपको कोई सप्लीमेंटेशन का, एडिशनल सप्लीमेंटेशन का सपोर्ट देना पड़ेगा. सो दिस इज व्हाट न्यूट्रिजेनोमिक्स हेल्प्स इन आइडेंटिफाइंग वन पर्टिकुलर न्यूट्रिएंट व्हिच इज इंपॉर्टेंट to up-regulate your immune system and help manage the any particular infection or concern for that matter. So immunity, vascular health. इम्यूनिटी एंड वैस्कुलर हेल्थ में रिलेशन क्या होता है? तो इसके जो पर्टिकुलर जीन्स या इससे जो एसोसिएटेड जीन्स होते हैं, इससे हमको पता चलता है रिस्क ऑफ वायरल इन्फेक्शंस क्या है, रिस्क ऑफ और बैक्टीरियल इन्फेक्शन. अभी जस्ट बिकॉज कोविड है हम वायरल इन्फेक्शन बोल रहे हैं, बट इन्फेक्शंस बहुत कुछ हो सकता है, बैक्टीरियल, फंगल, बहुत अलग अलग इन्फेक्शंस हो सकता है, जिसका फंडा, जिसका वे ऑफ मैनेजमेंट अगेन अलग अलग होता है. इन केस ऑफ वायरल अलग, इन केस ऑफ बैक्टीरियल अलग अलग, बट अदरवाइज हमारे लिए उसका एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग आता है कि कौन सा न्यूट्रिएंट किस इन्फेक्शन के लिए कितना जरूरी है और इसको कितना अप रेगुलेट या डाउन रेगुलेट करना चाहिए. एसोसिएशन ऑफ हाइपरटेंशन, एसोसिएशन ऑफ लॉन्ग टर्म डिजीज एंड एजिंग विद इम्यूनिटी. सो ये हमको एजिंग विद इम्यूनिटी कैलोरी मैनेजमेंट, ये एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट हो जाता है। सब हमको पता है, अगर हमको इम्यूनिटी इंक्रीज करना है बॉडी में, और हमको अगर पैंडेमिक के टाइम में हेल्दी रहना है, तो हमारा बॉडी आइडल वेट पे होना चाहिए। ऐसा नहीं है हमारा बॉडी हाईएस्ट वेट पे है 110 120 एंड और मैं रोज का काढ़ा पी रही हूँ और मुझे लगता है कि हाँ भी रोज का मैंने काढ़ा पिया है तो मुझे कोविड-19 से अटमोस्ट प्रोटेक्शन मिलेगा। नहीं, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है, बिकॉज अगर आपको अटमोस्ट प्रोटेक्शन चाहिए आपके लाइफ में इन टर्म्स ऑफ कोविड-19 मैनेज करने के लिए या फिर कोई पर्टिकुलर मैनेजमेंट करने के लिए, एक हॉलिस्टिक सपोर्ट होना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है। सो हॉलिस्टिक सपोर्ट मतलब क्या? आपका आइडल वेट होना चाहिए, आपका वेट बराबर होना चाहिए, आप जितना खाना खा रहे हो उतना आउटपुट होना चाहिए, खाना बराबर खाना चाहिए, एग्जैक्ट जितना आपके बॉडी का रिक्वायरमेंट है उतना आपको खाना खाना चाहिए। आप वाइटामिन मिनरल्स का इंपॉर्टेंट न्यूट्रिएंट है वो आपके डाइट में प्रॉपर्ली जाना चाहिए। फैट्स, प्रोटीन्स, कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स या फिर जो बाकी मिनरल्स होते हैं, जैसे सेलेनियम हो गया, जिंक हो गया या फिर बाकी न्यूट्रिएंट्स होते हैं, ये सब बैलेंस्ड फॉर्म में थ्रू एंड थ्रू आना चाहिए, तब जाके आपका एक ओवरऑल इम्यून सिस्टम क्रिएट होता है। सो इम्यून सिस्टम में कैलोरी मैनेजमेंट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। तो अभी अगर मुझे किसी को एक कैलोरी मैनेजमेंट प्लान देना है, या फिर आप लोग सब, आई एम श्योर हम में से सब हम ट्राई करते हैं वेट लॉस प्लान जाने के लिए या वेट मैनेजमेंट प्लान करने के लिए, जैसे हम बोलते हैं कि हम कैलोरी डाइट खा रहे या फिर हम डाइट फूड खा रहे। तो डाइट फूड मतलब क्या? ये हमारे दिमाग में बैठ गया कि डाइट फूड मतलब कम खाना चाहिए। सो डाइट फूड इज नॉट ऑल अबाउट कि कम खाना चाहिए। डाइट फूड इज ऑल अबाउट कि जितना बॉडी को रिक्वायरमेंट है उतना खाना चाहिए। अभी ये जितना बॉडी को रिक्वायरमेंट है उतना खाना चाहिए, ये इंफॉर्मेशन हमको कहां से मिलता है? नॉर्मली लोग क्या करते हैं, जो मेजर वे ऑफ मैनेजमेंट होता है कि मेरे दोस्त ने उसने सपोज कीटो डाइट फॉलो किया, कीटो डाइट से उसको रिजल्ट आ गया। मेरे दूसरे दोस्त ने उसने रात को चावल खाना बंद कर दिया, इसलिए उसको रिजल्ट आ गया। तो हम सुनते कि इसको इस पर्टिकुलर मैनेजमेंट में रिजल्ट आया, दूसरे को दूसरे पर्टिकुलर वे में मैनेजमेंट आया। सो हम ट्रायल एंड एरर करने जाते हैं कि सब में से किसको कौन सा बेटर होता है, और वो सब हम अपने पे यूटिलाइज करते हैं एंड देन कोशिश करते हैं कि हाँ चलो इसमें से कोई ना एक तो फिट आ जाएगा और उसमें कोई एक तो रिजल्ट आ जाएगा। सो इसमें हमारा क्या होता है? एक तो टाइम, एनर्जी जाता है, एफर्ट जाता है, मोटिवेशन लूज होता है। एंड दिस इज वन ऑफ द मेजर, लेट मी टेल यू, दिस इज वन ऑफ द सच अ मेजर कंसर्न कि जिसकी वजह से लोग बोलते हैं कि हाँ मैंने डाइट और एक्सरसाइज किया, 10 दिन किया, 12 दिन, 1 महीना किया, कुछ रिजल्ट नहीं हुआ, मैंने बंद कर दिया। वो इसलिए बंद कर देते बिकॉज नोइंगली अननोइंगली वो एग्जैक्टली वो नहीं करते जो उनके जेनेटिक्स में के हिसाब से या जेनेटिक्स के प्रमाण में होना चाहिए। तो जीन्स हमको डिसाइड करके बताता है या एडिक्वेटली इन्फॉर्म करता है कि एक बंदे का इनटेक, एडिक्वेट कैलोरी इनटेक कितना, कंजम्पशन कितना होना चाहिए, और उसका इम्पैक्ट ऑफ इम्बैलेंस कैलोरी मैनेजमेंट और रेस्पिरेटरी हेल्थ के साथ उसका क्या कनेक्शन है, ओबेसिटी और इम्यूनिटी का कनेक्शन क्या है, ये अंडरस्टैंडिंग हमको पता चलता है। सो अगर जेनेटिक्स बोलता है, कैलोरी मैनेजमेंट के साथ एसोसिएटेड जो कुछ जीन्स होते हैं, वो अगर बोलता है कि ओबेसिटी अगर इंसान ने वेट बढ़ाया है, इसका इम्यूनिटी डाउन होने वाला है, तो ये यहाँ पे मेरे लिए एक रेड फ्लैग हो जाता है। तो मुझे उस पर्सन को कॉन्स्टेंटली इन्फॉर्म करना होगा कि सर देखिए, आप जो भी खाना खाइए या जैसे भी मैनेजमेंट करिए, आपको आपका वेट मेंटेन रखना ही पड़ेगा। आप आपका वेट इंक्रीज नहीं कर सकते, बिकॉज द मोमेंट आपका वेट इंक्रीज हुआ, आपका इम्यूनिटी डाउन रेगुलेट हो जाएगा या फिर आपका इम्यूनिटी प्रॉपर्ली काम नहीं करेगा। तो ये इन्फॉर्मेशन मुझे कहाँ से आया कि मैं टिपिकली ओबेसिटी या वेट पे फोकस करूँ, ये मुझे जेनेटिक्स ने बताता है। बिकॉज जेनेटिक्स के जो जीन्स इंक्लूडेड होते हैं कैलोरी मैनेजमेंट के साथ, वो उसके म्यूटेशन या नॉट म्यूटेशन पे मुझे पता चलता है कि कितना ओबेसिटी का रिस्क इम्यूनिटी पे है या ओबेसिटी का रिस्क इम्यूनिटी पे नहीं है। सो इन दैट केस ऑफ मैनेजमेंट आता है, हम फिर उनको बोलते हैं कि आप एक्सरसाइज करिए बराबर से, आप जो कैलोरी खाना खा रहे हो, 1500 खाना खा रहे हो, उसको आप 1500 रेगुलर मील में ही करिए, बाहर का खाना कम खाइए, उसको राइट वे में ट्रेन करते हैं ताकि वो अपने जो अर्ज ऑफ फूड होता है या फिर खाना खाने के जो हमारा जो बिंजिंग टेंडेंसीज रहते हैं, जिसके मन करता है कि चलो अभी 6 बजे का भी एक पेस्ट्री खा लेना चाहिए या एक समोसा खा लेना चाहिए। तो राइट ट्रेनिंग एंड राइट मैनेजमेंट के साथ ये सब जो लूप होल्स होते हैं जिसकी वजह से हम डाइट या एक्सरसाइज अध्ययन या फॉलो नहीं कर पाते, वो हम बहुत इजीली और बहुत बेटर वे में मैनेज कर पाते विद इन अ लेसर टाइम, बिकॉज ऑब्वियसली आप इसमें ट्रायल एंड एरर नहीं करते हो। नेक्स्ट, ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस मैनेजमेंट। अभी ये ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस मैनेजमेंट मतलब क्या? ऑन एवरीडे बेसिस जब हमारा बॉडी मल्टीपल फंक्शन करता है, बॉडी हम सबको एक थैंकफुल होना चाहिए कि हमारा बॉडी विदाउट आवर नोइंग, हमको पता नहीं होता है कि कितना काम कर रहा है, बट बैकग्राउंड पे आप जब बैठ के न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ते हो, टीवी फोन देखते हो, आपका बॉडी कितना कुछ काम करता है. तो ये जब सेलुलर लेवल में बॉडी इतने वे में काम करता है, एक बाई प्रोडक्ट या फ्री रेडिकल जनरेट होता है, जो हर किसी का नॉर्मल टेंडेंसी होता है. हम हर कोई जनरेट करते हैं ये फ्री रेडिकल्स, जिसको हम बोलते हैं. सो बॉडी का टेंडेंसी भी होता है, जब आप ये फ्री रेडिकल भी जनरेट करते हो, बॉडी खुद ब खुद ये फ्री रेडिकल्स को स्कैवेंज कर देता है, ये न्यूट्रलाइज करके बॉडी के सिस्टम में से अलग कर देता है. लेकिन अगर आपका बॉडी इम्यूनिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में लो है, तो आपका बॉडी फ्री रेडिकल सिस्टम को स्कैवेंज या फिर सिस्टम में से प्रॉपर्ली एलिमिनेट नहीं कर पाता है. एंड जस्ट बिकॉज वो प्रॉपर्ली एलिमिनेट नहीं कर पाता है, वो आपको बाकी के कंप्लेंट्स देते हैं, जैसे very susceptible to catching of infection. This is why you will find that many people have complaints such as कि मैंने थोड़ा सा बाहर गया या फिर थोड़ा सा ठंडा खाया या फिर थोड़ा सा कुछ खाया, मुझे एलर्जी हो गया, मुझे सर्दी खांसी हो गया. The reason is सेलुलर लेवल पे ये जो सिस्टम होता है, जो स्कैवेंज करने का या फिर जो फ्री रेडिकल्स निकालने का, ये प्रॉपर्ली नहीं सिस्टम है. और इसको कौन अप रेगुलेट करता है, इसको कौन मैनेज या बेटर करता है, इसको आपके न्यूट्रिएंट्स मैनेज करते हैं. फ्रूट्स, वेजिटेबल्स, एंटीऑक्सीडेंट्स बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है. ये एंटीऑक्सीडेंट आपके डाइट पे अगर रेगुलर पे रहता है, तो आप जब ये फ्री रेडिकल्स जनरेट करते हो, ये उसको न्यूट्रलाइज कर लेता है. बिकॉज लेट मी टेल यू, इफ फ्री रेडिकल्स आर नॉट वेल न्यूट्रलाइज, हर एक का बॉडी का सिस्टम अलग होता है, एंड वो फ्री रेडिकल डीजनरेट कर सकता है बहुत अलग अलग वे में. किसी को स्किन में प्रॉब्लम दिख जाता है, किसी को हेयर पे प्रॉब्लम दिखना चालू हो जाएगा, किसी को इम्यूनिटी कम होना चालू हो जाता है, किसी को कैंसर तक के भी कंसर्न्स हो सकता है. वो हाईएस्ट लेवल है, कैंसर लेवल तक भी कंसर्न हो सकता है. क्यों? क्योंकि बैकग्राउंड पे फ्री रेडिकल जो आप जनरेट कर रहे हो, उसको आप प्रॉपर्ली मैनेज नहीं कर पा रहे. तो उसको किस तरीके से आप सपोर्ट करेंगे? उससे आप सपोर्ट करेंगे कि आप आपके डाइट में एक गुड अमाउंट ऑफ एंटीऑक्सीडेंट न्यूट्रिएंट दीजिए. अभी एंटीऑक्सीडेंट मतलब क्या? फ्रूट्स एंड वेजिटेबल्स, सिंपल फॉर्म में. फ्रूट्स एंड वेजिटेबल्स तो बहुत कुछ है मार्केट में, इतना कुछ मिलता है. अभी इसमें से कौन सा क्या, आप ग्रीन टी पियेंगे या फिर आप एंटीऑक्सीडेंट में कोई दूसरा काढ़ा लेंगे? There's so many things to follow, right? So green tea is definitely one of the important potent antioxidant, but that is not the only one. ऐसा नहीं है कि ग्रीन टी पीने से आपका फ्री रेडिकल्स एकदम से मैनेज हो जाएगा, या फिर आपने रोज ग्रीन टी पिया तो आपका इम्यूनिटी ऐसा होने वाला है कि आप एकदम मतलब इन्फेक्शन कुछ होगा ही नहीं. ऐसा नहीं. ग्रीन टी के साथ साथ देयर इज सम अदर रिक्वायरमेंट ऑल्सो ना, क्योंकि आपका सिस्टम खाली ग्रीन टी के बेसिस पे तो नहीं चल सकता है, बाकी भी सिस्टम का नेसेसरी है. सो बाकी न्यूट्रिएंट्स क्या है, ये न्यूट्रिएंट्स जेनेटिक्स से पता चलता है. सो एट टाइम्स जब मैं जेनेटिक्स रिपोर्ट्स हम जब पढ़ते हैं या देखते हैं, तो हम आइडेंटिफाई कर पाते हैं कि सर देखिए आपका ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस पुअर है, जिसकी वजह से मुझे आपके डाइट में बहुत ज्यादा करके विटामिन सी देना पड़ेगा, या फिर विटामिन सी बराबर है लेकिन मुझे आपके डाइट में बहुत ज्यादा करके सेलेनियम देना पड़ेगा, या फिर मुझे आपके डाइट में बहुत सारा करके ओरैक, जो नॉर्मली फ्री रेडिकल्स को स्कैवेंज करते हैं, उसको ओरैक बोलते हैं, वो मुझे आपके डाइट में ज्यादा देना पड़ेगा. आप बाकी तो ठीक खाइए, लेकिन आप गुआवा ज्यादा करके खाइए, या फिर आप फ्रूट में आप इतना मेक श्योर करिए, बाकी आपका डाइट जैसे भी रहे, लेकिन आप आपके डाइट में मेक श्योर करिए कि आप एटलीस्ट 3 फ्रूट्स एंड 3 वेजिटेबल्स एंड 2 फ्रूट तो आप मिनिमम रखिए. इससे आपका फ्री रेडिकल मैनेज हो पाएगा. सो ये जो नंबरिंग सिस्टम होता है, जहाँ पे मैं नंबर कर पा रही हूँ कि मैं 3 वेजिटेबल खाऊंगी या फिर 2 फ्रूट खाऊंगी, ये मुझे इन्फॉर्मेशन जेनेटिक्स के थ्रू पता चलता है. बट अदरवाइज अगर जेनेटिक्स नहीं होता है, या फिर जेनेटिक्स के विदाउट मुझे कंसल्टेशन करना होता है, मैं उसको बोलूंगी सर आपका एंटीऑक्सीडेंट का रिक्वायरमेंट ज्यादा है, तो मैं अपने प्रैक्टिस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में तो शायद मैं उनको एक ज्यादा ही एंटीऑक्सीडेंट रिक्वायरमेंट दे दूं, जो उनको नेसेसरी नहीं है. सो अगर नेसेसरी नहीं है वो थिंग्स करने का, तो अननेसेसरी आप क्यों एक्स्ट्रा बर्डन उठाएंगे जो आपको जरूरी नहीं है करने के लिए. सो दिस इज व्हाट द अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज ऑल अबाउट ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस इन रिलेशन टू immune system, building up immune system, and managing any kind of oxidants, yeah, managing koi bhi kind of free radical generations. Next is vitamin management. So vitamins, we all have known through this pandemic that B complex supplementation लेना जरूरी है अगर COVID-19 से बचना है, या फिर जिंकोवेट वाला जो सप्लीमेंट होता है, या फिर फॉर दैट मैटर विटामिन सी वाला जो सप्लीमेंट होता है, ये हमको रैंडमली लेना ही है कैसे भी करके, बिकॉज हमको COVID-19 बचाना है. सो इन दिस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, ये जो आप सप्लीमेंटेशन अभी ले रहे हो, ये आपको लॉन्ग टर्म तक फॉलो करना है, या सिर्फ आप डाइट से मैनेज कर पाते हो? अगर हम आपका डाइट असेस या फिर आपका जेनेटिक असेस करते हैं एंड जेनेटिक असेस करके हमको पता चलता है कि ये बंदे का जेनेटिक सिस्टम ऐसा है कि अगर वो रोज का खाना खाएगा, उसका रोज का रेगुलर बैलेंस्ड फ्रूट वेजिटेबल्स पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में अगर जितना रिक्वायरमेंट है, अगर वो खाना खाता है, वो अपने डाइट से वो मैनेज कर लेगा, चाहे वो इन्फेक्शन हो या कुछ भी हो। लेकिन अगर जीन्स अच्छे नहीं है, देन हम बोलते हैं हाँ आपको सप्लीमेंटेशन का जरूरत है। बट जस्ट बाय गोइंग विद द सेक कि पैंडेमिक चला और मुझे बहुत सारा करके सप्लीमेंटेशन लेना है, इसका एक नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट भी आता है। नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट ये होता है कि आपके बॉडी को जरूरत नहीं है, फिर भी आप उसको लोड कर रहे हो बहुत ज्यादा न्यूट्रिएंट और बहुत ज्यादा सप्लीमेंटेशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू। एट द एंड तो काम तो बॉडी को ही करना है ना, बिकॉज सप्लीमेंटेशन का भी कोटिंग्स होता है या फिर कुछ प्रोडक्ट्स होता है जो बॉडी को एक्सक्रीट करना होता है, और काम कौन करता है? आपका बॉडी करता है, लिवर करता है, जो अननेसेसरी जरूरत नहीं है, क्योंकि आपका बॉडी को उतना चाहिए ही नहीं था। आपका बॉडी डाइट आप गुआवा खा लीजिए या फिर आमंड खा लीजिए या फिर दूसरा कोई फ्रूट्स एंड वेजिटेबल्स खा लीजिए, आपका बॉडी उसको बेटर वे में मैनेज कर लेगा। सो जो रिक्वायरमेंट, एग्जैक्ट रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ राइट बैलेंस ऑफ सर्टेन विटामिन्स सच एज B6, B9, B12, ये मुझे आपको सप्लीमेंटेशन के साथ देना है या मैं खाली डाइट के साथ दे सकती हूँ, ये मुझे इन्फॉर्मेशन जेनेटिक्स के थ्रू बहुत एक्यूरेटली पता चलता है। और दिस इज व्हाई वी से कि जो हम आपको पेपर में आपके जेनेटिक्स देख के लिख के देंगे, ये कॉन्क्रीट होता है, ये चेंज नहीं हो सकता है, बिकॉज जीन्स कभी नहीं चेंज होता। तो ये टेस्ट आप आज करिए, आप 10 साल बाद करिए, जेनेटिक्स सेम रहने वाला है, मेरा मैनेजमेंट का गाइडलाइंस भी सेम रहने वाला है। हाँ, आपके लाइक्स एंड डिसलाइक्स चेंज हो सकता है। सो टुडे यू मे लाइक ब्रिंजल एंड टुमारो यू मे नॉट लाइक ब्रिंजल, सो द लाइक्स एंड डिसलाइक में ऑलवेज वेरी, बट ब्रिंजल का जो न्यूट्रिएंट है वो नेसेसरी है, ये मुझे जेनेटिक्स बोलता है। ये जो न्यूट्रिएंट नेसेसरी है, ये मुझे लाइफ लॉन्ग फॉलो करना है टू स्टे हेल्दी, so that not just COVID-19, other infections do not also catch me up, and even if it catches me up, I know how to, my body knows how well it should be managing it in an appropriate way. Next होता है, next very important segment is inflammation. So inflammation मतलब कहना वेरी लेमैन्स टर्म, हम अगर सपोज कुछ काम करते हैं या फिर ब्रूसेस होता है, फिर हाथ कट जाता है तो हाथ से ब्रूस होता है, ब्लीडिंग होता है, एंड दैट्स अ एक्सटर्नल इन्फ्लेमेशन, या फिर सूजन हो जाता है, कोई भी काइंड ऑफ सूजन या फिर रेडिशनेस या फिर स्वेलिंग, ये सूजन हो जाता है, एंड ये इज एन एक्सटर्नल इन्फ्लेमेशन। लाइकवाइज सेलुलरली, सिंस आपका बॉडी बहुत सारा एक्टिविटी करता है, ये सेल लेवल पे भी इन्फ्लेमेशन होता है। तो ये सेल लेवल का इन्फ्लेमेशन नॉर्मल होना है, बट ये होके ठीक होना, दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट। अगर होके ठीक हो जाता है विच इज फाइन, बट होके अगर ठीक नहीं होता है तब जाके लोगों को प्रॉब्लम दिखना चालू हो जाता है। क्या प्रॉब्लम होता है? इम्यूनिटी कम हो जाएगा, वन ऑफ द थिंग, ओबेसिटी होने का रिस्क बनता है, या फिर बाकी किसी भी इन्फेक्शंस का, जैसे स्किन इन्फेक्शन हो गया, स्किन प्रॉब्लम हो गया, हेयर प्रॉब्लम हो गया, रेडनेस ऑफ आई, बाकी जो छोटे छोटे कंसर्न या फिर मेजर कंसर्न भी होते हैं, ये कंसर्न हो सकता है। बिकॉज क्या हो रहा है? क्योंकि बैकग्राउंड पे सेल लेवल में आप जाके देखो, जो आपका बॉडी इन्फ्लेमेशन कर रहा है उससे वो ठीक नहीं हो पा रहा है। उसको ठीक करने के लिए हमको बैकग्राउंड में कुछ एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी सप्लीमेंटेशन या सपोर्ट सिस्टम क्रिएट करना या एक इकोसिस्टम क्रिएट करना जरूरी होता है। सो एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी इकोसिस्टम क्या होता है? जैसे डाइट में थिंग्स इंक्लूड कर दे, omega-3 या omega-6, गुड फैट्स, cod livers, या फिर for that matter chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, or this kind of different variation of seeds for non-vegetarians. Fish is a very good anti-inflammatory sources. Walnut, almonds, ये सब anti-inflammatory sources होते हैं। So background में अगर inflammation ठीक नहीं हो रहा है, तो मुझे from the phenotype point of view या फिर from dietary point of view में मुझे ये सब food आपके डाइट में इंक्लूड करना पड़ेगा, ताकि जो बैकग्राउंड में ठीक नहीं हो रहा है वो उसको सपोर्ट कर सके, एंड जो उस इन्फ्लेमेशन से रिलेटेड जो कंसर्न्स हो सकता है, जैसे इम्यूनिटी लेस हो जाना या फिर स्किन का डलनेस हो जाना, हेयर फॉल होना, डैंड्रफ होना, स्लीप नहीं होना, ये सब कंसर्न सिम्टम्स कम हो जाए एंड आपको बेटर रिजल्ट दिखे। अगर मैं डाइट में से कर पा रही हूँ वेल, मतलब अगर डाइट में से आपका बॉडी मैनेज कर लेता है वेरी गुड, बट अगर आपके डाइट से मैनेज नहीं होता तो शायद मुझे एडिशनल सप्लीमेंटेशन लगेगा, कॉड लिवर ऑयल का, या फिर मैं तब मुझे आपको बोलना पड़ेगा कि आप omega-3 का सप्लीमेंट ले लीजिए, या फिर बाकी आप किसी और चीज का सप्लीमेंटेशन लेना स्टार्ट करिए। लेकिन अगर डाइट करता है, आई एम हैप्पी कि मैं आपको डाइट के साथ मैनेज उसको कर सकती हूँ, आपको सप्लीमेंटेशन की जरूरत नहीं होगा। तो दिस इंफॉर्मेशन कि वेदर आई विल नीड सप्लीमेंटेशन और whether my body can manage it from the dietary point of view, this is again from the genetics. This genetics helps understand the association between inflammatory response and weak immunity system, requirement of right balance of anti-inflammatory nutrients, and to ensure so that you prevent conditions such as obesity हो गया, cardiovascular हो गया, and other health related concerns को आप easily manage कर पाते. Because again, let me tell you, चाहे कोई भी कंसर्न क्यों ना हो जाए, चाहे वो हार्ट का कंसर्न हो या डायबिटीज कंसर्न हो गया या फिर कोविड-19 का इन्फेक्शन काइंड ऑफ कंसर्न, इट इज नॉट जस्ट वन थिंग विच वर्क्स. अब पैरेलली बहुत सारा थिंग्स काम करता है. आपको इन्फ्लेमेशन मैनेज करना है, आपको ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस या फ्री रेडिकल्स जाके बैकग्राउंड में मैनेज करना है. सो बहुत सारे चीज आपको अलग अलग वे में जाके मैनेज करना होगा, तब जाके आपको रिजल्ट या फिर होलिस्टिक अप्रोच मिलेगा इन सच अ वे कि आप चाहे आपका इन्फेक्शन कोविड-19 हो या फिर कोई हार्ट कंडीशन हो या फिर डायबिटीज कंडीशन हो, आप उसको अटमोस्ट वे में, बेटर वे में उसको मैनेज कर सके. नेक्स्ट और एक कंसर्न होता है डिटॉक्सिफिकेशन. डिटॉक्सिफिकेशन हम सबको पता है, हम सब कभी ना कभी एक डिटॉक्स डाइट फॉलो कर लेते हैं जस्ट बिकॉज किसी सेलिब्रिटी ने बोला है या फिर हमने गूगल में पढ़ा है डिटॉक्स डाइट फॉलो करना जरूरी होता है. डाइट इज मोर ऑफ अ फैड, एक फैड बन गया है. हम ये नहीं सोचते कि हमको बेनिफिट कितना आएगा, बट जस्ट बिकॉज एक सेलिब्रिटी ने किया है हमको करते, बट हम उसको अंडरस्टैंड नहीं कर पाते कि इसको सेलिब्रिटी ने किया है वो नेसेसरी है, उसको वो प्रमोट कर रहा है, वो डेफिनेटली नेसेसरी, बट उसको रेगुलर यूज में करना है. ऐसा नहीं कि जस्ट बिकॉज मन किया आज करने के लिए आज कर लिया, 10 दिन नहीं किया और साल भर नहीं किया, फिर कोविड-19 जब आएगा तब क्या. ऐसा नहीं होता. It has to be in the process through and throughout. So detoxification is nothing. Let me explain you what is detoxification. Detoxification is nothing but it is a process of your body to eliminate any kind of toxics from the system. हमारा body on everyday basis is subjected to many toxic systems. Okay, जैसे बाहर जाते हैं हम, पोल्यूशन होता है, या फिर हम बहुत सारा जंक फूड खा लेते हैं, बैड फूड, बैड ऑयल कुकिंग, हम एक्सरसाइज नहीं करते हैं, या फिर हम बहुत ज्यादा सप्लीमेंटेशन ले रहे हैं. सो ये सब जो एक्स्ट्रा बॉडी उतना ही रखता है जितना जरूरी है, जितना जरूरी नहीं है बॉडी निकाल देता है. ये बॉडी का फिजियोलॉजी है. तो जब हम जंक फूड खाते हैं, बहुत बैड ऑयल्स खाते हैं या फिर टू मेनी सप्लीमेंटेशन लेते हैं, बॉडी उतना ही रखेगा जितना जरूरी है. तो बॉडी को एक्स्ट्रा बैड ऑयल ये सब की जरूरत नहीं होता. तो बॉडी क्या करता है, ये सबको निकालने की कोशिश करता है. तो जब ये निकालने की कोशिश करता है, ये लिवर के थ्रू होता है. तो इस प्रोसेस को, जो टॉक्सिन्स को सिस्टम में से निकालना होता है, इसको डिटॉक्सिफिकेशन कहते हैं. कहाँ पे होता है ये एक्टिविटी होता है आपके लिवर पे. लिवर तो यूजुअली करता ही है, बट लिवर के एक्टिविटी को सपोर्ट कैसे कर सकते हैं हम, लिवर के एक्टिविटी को बेटर वे में सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं, ताकि आप कुछ ऐसे फूड या फ्रूट एंड वेजिटेबल्स या खाना इंक्लूड करें, जैसे कॉलीफ्लावर हो गया, या फिर कैबेज हो गया, सल्फर ग्रुप के फूड्स हो गए, या फिर आप क्या बाकी न्यूट्रिएंट्स हो जाते हैं, फ्रूट जूसेस, वेजिटेबल जूसेस, स्पिनच, देन आपके ऑल कलर्ड, 7 कलर्ड. एक सिंपल लॉजिक होता है, आपका प्लेट, हम डाइटेटिक्स में पढ़ते हैं कि आपका प्लेट शुड हैव 7 डिफरेंट कलर्स. सो अगर आपके डाइट में आपका जो लंच या डिनर है, अगर 7 डिफरेंट कलर्स आपका दिखता है रेनबो में से, दैट मीन्स यू आर ईटिंग अ गुड वन. लेकिन अगर उसमें से एक कलर भी मिस होता है, विच मीन्स कुछ तो गड़बड़ है, राइट फूड नहीं जा रहा है, या फिर कोई एक कलर प्रोमिनेंट है और दूसरा कलर दिख ही नहीं रहा है, तो ये रॉन्ग है. सो एक सिंपल फंडा या लॉजिक जाता है, आपका डाइट, आपका जो प्लेट होता है कलरफुल होना चाहिए, 7 कलर्स होने चाहिए फ्रॉम द सोर्सेज ऑफ फ्रूट्स एंड वेजिटेबल्स एंड रेगुलर. ये ऐसा नहीं कि 7 कलर मतलब किसी बाहर का कलरिंग एजेंट ला दीजिए, ऐसा नहीं. द रेगुलर फूड जो हम खाते हैं उसमें 7 कलर्स अगर होता है, then that means you're eating, your diet has a good healthy diet and you're eating a right foods. You are on a path to eat at least on a right necessary foods. Now the next aspect is about exercise management. This is also a very interesting aspect. Genetics जो identify and modify करता है. So exercise में हमको पता है, हमको इतना तो नॉलेज हम सबको पता चल गया है कि एक्सरसाइज करना जरूरी है, तभी जाके वेट लूज होता है, या फिर तभी जाके राइट डाइट हम या राइट हेल्थ हो सकता है, राइट. सो अभी क्वेश्चन ये आता है, एक्सरसाइज करे तो करे क्या, मैराथन रन करेंगे या फिर 15 मिनट्स एक्सरसाइज करके ठीक है, या फिर फॉर सर्टेन पीपल घर मॉप कर लिया तो वो भी एक्सरसाइज है, उतना चल जाएगा, या योगा किया वो चल जाएगा, या पिलाटेस किया वो चल जाएगा. कितना करेंगे, 1 घंटा करे, 2 घंटा करे, 4 घंटा करे, या सिर्फ 15 मिनट करे, कितना, जो ये जो इंटेंसिटी एंड ड्यूरेशन कौन डिसाइड करता है? दिस इज अगेन डिसाइडेड बाय द जीन्स. सो योर जीन्स very precisely tells you that how much should be the duration and how much should be the intensity of exercises. So if your gene says, genes अगर बोलता है कि आपको intensity of exercises ज़्यादा करना होगा, तो in that case simple walking, रेगुलर 10-15 मिनट वॉकिंग को अगर आप कंसिडर करते हो एक्सरसाइज में, वो नहीं होने वाला है, रिजल्ट नहीं होने वाला है. क्यों? क्योंकि आपके जीन्स का रिक्वायरमेंट या फिर आपका बॉडी का रिक्वायरमेंट है हायर इंटेंसिटी है, तो थोड़ा सा हमको इंटेंसिटी बढ़ाना पड़ेगा. लेकिन हाँ, उसका कॉन्ट्ररी या फिर उसका ऑपोजिट वाइस वर्सा भी है. जीन्स अगर बोलता है आपको उतना इंटेंसिटी एक्सरसाइज नेसेसरी नहीं है, हाई इंटेंसिटी एक्सरसाइज नेसेसरी नहीं है, तो आपको दिन के 2-2 घंटे, दिन के 4-4 घंटे, मतलब लंबा आवर्स ऑफ एक्सरसाइज करने की जरूरत नहीं. आप तब उस टाइम 15 मिनट या आधा घंटा जितना नेसेसरी है, जितना एक्सरसाइज कंसल्टेंट बता के बोलता है, उतना एक्सरसाइज अगर आप करोगे, आपका बॉडी थ्रू एंड थ्रू आउट हेल्दी एंड बेटर वे में रहेगा. चाहे वो कोविड-19 हो, चाहे वो इन्फेक्शन हो, चाहे वो वेट लॉस के लिए क्यों ना हो जाए, चाहे वो किसी भी कोमॉर्बिडिटीज कंसर्न क्यों ना हो जाए, उसको बेटर वे में मैनेज कर सकता है. दूसरा आता है एक्सरसाइज कब करना चाहिए, सुबह करना चाहिए कि शाम को करना चाहिए. ये इन्फॉर्मेशन कौन बताता है? ये भी हमको जेनेटिक्स के थ्रू पता चल जाता है. एसोसिएशन, अगर आपका जेनेटिक्स बताता है कि इन्फॉर्मेशन ये है कि आपको एक्सरसाइज इवनिंग करना चाहिए, तो आपको टेक्निकली एक्सरसाइज अगर आप इवनिंग करेंगे, मतलब जो जीन्स एसोसिएटेड होते हैं एक्सरसाइज के साथ, तो अगर आप इवनिंग में डिसाइड करेंगे, ये आपका जीन बताएगा होता है, तो आप अगर इवनिंग में एक्सरसाइज करेंगे तो आपका बॉडी बेटर मतलब वो आप बेटर वे में मैनेज कर पाएगा. जैसे मुझे अगर वेट निकालना है 4 kg महीने में, तो मैं अगर शाम को एक्सरसाइज करूंगी तो शायद मेरा बॉडी 3 से 4 kg निकाल लेगा. लेकिन अगर मैं सुबह एक्सरसाइज करूंगी, मेरा बॉडी सिर्फ 2 या 3 kg करेगा, क्योंकि मेरा सुबह का मेटाबॉलिज्म स्लोअर है रात के मेटाबॉलिज्म के टाइम से, या फिर मेरा मेटाबॉलिज्म थ्रू एंड थ्रू एक्टिवेट थ्रू एंड थ्रू एक पैरेलल पे है, जिसमें मैं कभी भी एक्सरसाइज करूँ, सुबह करूँ, दोपहर को करूँ, शाम को करूँ, मेरा बॉडी एक ही कांस्टेंट, मतलब जितना रिक्वायरमेंट है उतना ही रिजल्ट देगा. सो दिस इज व्हाट इन्फॉर्मेशन वी गेट टू नो. तो उस इंफॉर्मेशन के बेसिस में हम एक डिजाइन करते हैं, प्लान डिजाइन करते हैं, जिसमें हम बताते हैं डाइट में डे 1 से लेके या एवरी डे 7 तक क्या क्या डाइट, कितना क्वांटिटी में या कितना प्रोपोर्शन में लेना चाहिए और क्या क्या चीजें लेना नहीं चाहिए. लाइकवाइज एक्सरसाइज में कितना एक्सरसाइज डे 1 से डे 7 तक क्या क्या एक्सरसाइज करना चाहिए, कितना एक्सरसाइज करना चाहिए, कितना ब्रेक्स लेना चाहिए आपको एक्सरसाइज में, क्योंकि अगर आपका बॉडी का रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं है आप हाई इंटेंसिटी एक्सरसाइज करने का, और अगर आप और बाई चांस अगर आप हाई इंटेंसिटी एक्सरसाइज कर रहे हो, देन दैट केस आप ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस इंक्रीज कर रहे हो, आप इन्फ्लेमेशन क्रिएट कर रहे हो बॉडी के लिए, विच इज नॉट अ फेवरेबल कंडीशन. और इन्फ्लेमेशन, ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस ये अगर हुआ तो ये लॉन्ग टर्म कुछ ना कुछ कंसर्न्स, मतलब आपका बाकी कोई कंसर्न एज सच हो जाएगा. तो उस सबको अवॉइड करने के लिए राइट एप्रोप्रिएट एक्सरसाइज करना जरूरी है. एंड दिस इज द मेजर रीजन या आंसर जिसकी वजह से वी आर एबल टू टेल इट टू पीपल कि जो ये क्वेश्चंस आता है यूजुअली कि मैं इतना एक्सरसाइज करता हूँ बट मेरा वेट रिड्यूस नहीं होता. अरे मैंने 2 महीने एक्सरसाइज तो कर लिया, कुछ नहीं हुआ, ये फालतू प्लान है, इससे कुछ नहीं होने वाला. वो इसलिए है क्योंकि आप कहीं ना कहीं नोइंगली एंड नोइंगली वो नहीं कर रहे हो जो आपका जेनेटिक्स कर रहा है. अगर आपने जेनेटिक्स के हिसाब से मैनेजमेंट अपना प्रॉपर रखा तो आपको डेफिनेटली कुछ रिजल्ट आना चाहिए, डेफिनेटली कुछ तो रिजल्ट होना चाहिए. और ये हमारे क्लाइंट्स बोलते हैं, या मैं जब पेशेंट से बात करते हैं, कुछ ऐसा होता है इन्फॉर्मेशन जो हमको नहीं एक्सपेक्टेड है कि ये हो सकता है, बट क्लाइंट्स हमको रिपोर्ट करते हैं कि हाँ ये एक्सरसाइज करने पे हमको ये बेनिफिट है, या फिर ये डाइट इंक्रीज करने में हमको ये बेनिफिट है. सो दिस इज हाउ इट इज पर्सनलाइज्ड इट इज, एंड दिस वे इट हेल्प्स यू अंडरस्टैंड कि कितना और कब ड्यूरेशन में कितना इंटेंसिटी में करना चाहिए. So now the next question is, after knowing all this thing, why genetics for COVID-19? So genetics, why it is genetics for COVID-19? Because with the help of genetics in COVID-19, we will be, or with the genes, it will be easy, it will be better for your consultant to decide the type of diet to be followed. फैट कम करना है, फैट ज्यादा रखना है, इम्यूनिटी बढ़ाने के लिए विटामिन सी कम करना है, विटामिन सी ज्यादा करना है, या फिर विटामिन मिनरल्स कितना नेसेसरी है, ज्यादा रखना है, कम रखना है, ये बराबर राइट इन्फॉर्मेशन मिलता है. एक्सरसाइज कितना करना है, कब करना है, कितना ड्यूरेशन में करना है, एग्जैक्ट क्वांटिफिकेशन, एग्जैक्ट क्वांटिटी पता चलता है, वो फॉलो करना है. सो वो एक आपका एक पर्सनलाइज्ड प्लान होता है, क्योंकि जीन्स बताता है, जीन्स के रिस्पॉन्सेस चेंज नहीं होता है, बिकॉज दिस इज समथिंग यू बीन बॉर्न विद. So with several diets and exercise available, it is important to know your genetic makeup and then adapt to the most relevant diet as per your genetic makeup, especially in the time of this uncertainty. So yes, picking up to the right management is very important. And if you pick up to the right management with the right way of lifestyle management, the right sleep, right diet, right vitamins, right exercise, you are in the right track. At the end of the day, आपका immune system बहुत अच्छा build-up होता है, आपका body किसी भी infections या किसी भी concerns को एक better way में fight कर सकता है, manage कर सकता है. So what genetic test in COVID-19 ensures? It ensures a study of varieties of genes, and of course बहुत सारे genes का study होता है जिसमें हम एक gene का हर एक अलग से detailed significant conditions पता चलता है, जो आपको of course आपके counselor consultation के time आपको explain करेंगे कि क्या result है, क्या कितना करना चाहिए. Immunity analysis होता है, requirement of various nutrient essential for immunity boosting or baki and to fight for any kind of infections, personalized diet and personalized exercise. So this is about the entire need about genetics and the diet, and how helpful it is to finalize a particular plan which has to be followed. So yeah, I am done with the presentation. So I'll be open for taking up quick questions, queries.
All right, so thank you very much, Aditi. एक बात तो बहुत आसानी से हमको सबको समझ में आ गई, and that is we cannot be consuming food just by hearsay from some other people, or maybe just because I like it, or just on the taste buds. It has to be gene-based diet, and that's exactly what we should be doing it. So thank you very much, Aditi. I don't think we have time for questions. We're supposed to be having another session, and we're just almost overshot the time. So let's wave our hands, and wherever you are, whether the video is on or no, let's wave our hands, acknowledge Aditi for that wonderful information. Loads of information, but during since there's a lack of time, I think you did really fast, and we covered up. We will definitely have much more sessions in the future. So thank you, Aditi.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you so much.
All right. So now we move to the last session, and it's going to be a quick, very interesting session. And I would like to now talk about this person who's going to take this session. Is my partner in somebody who actually oriented me also in Velocity Genetics way back from 2016. And he's a Babson University, USA graduate. He has also done his genetic studies in Monash University of Australia. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a technocrat, and the kind of alignment that I and he have, it's been very instrumental in educating people about both passionately about the importance of nutrigenomics. So with the waving of your hands, I'd like to now invite the Chief Product Officer of Velocity Genetics, and he's a part of the management in Velocity Life Sciences Private Limited. Let's wave our hands for Mr. Milind Doshi.
Hi everyone. Hello. How are you? Am I audible?
Yes,
if I'm audible, please do a thumbs up.
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So that I can see my talk. Share screen. Enable screen share. It's showing host disable participant screen sharing.
There you go.
Yeah, done. Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay. Okay, guys. So my talk is going to be about the breakthroughs in genetics that are happening in the world right now. Aaj kya ho raha hai? And I will start my talk with showing you the latest breakthroughs in 2021 in the last May and June month. Okay, and many of these things are following up on all the predictions I had made earlier about what would happen in the field. Now there's a lot of approval, and a lot of genetically engineered life forms and solutions for real world problems are launched and approved and in the market. Okay, so it's a very important year, and also very scary at the same time for some of you. So I will start by saying that biology is converging with technology, and it is giving us a superpower. Okay, and if you see the intersection of these three circles, that's where genetic engineering and biotechnology currently lies. So this industry, I do not be fooled here, industry will be a part of every industry in the world. Okay, there will not be one industry that it will not touch. So I will explain my point shortly. But currently, we are spending in the field of medicine about $75 billion in America only, on how to make new medicines and new solutions for problems. And I think one of the cutting edge fields of solving new healthcare conditions is through gene therapy. In gene therapy, we have heard about CRISPR and Cas9, which was which was a pretty good technology. But now we are hearing about a new thing called RLR. RLR is essentially Retron Library Recombination. It's basically gene editing at a million base pair scale. It was invented by Dr. George Church in Harvard University, and they've essentially found a bacteria in nature that naturally edits without harming the DNA in millions of base pair regions. So this is something that's upcoming that allows us to make more and more changes in the human being's biology or any other living creature's biology. There was in 2019, I spoke about this woman and said that she was going to be the first person who's going to be cured from age-related macular degeneration in a research experiment. But now that particular drug for blindness through gene therapy is out in the world. There's a blind man who was blind for 40 years. He can now get partial vision because they've essentially put the light sensitive proteins in the eyes through gene editing. And now that person can visualize again. So this field of research is now called optogenetics. And optogenetics is run by there's one leading company in the world in this field called Nanoscope. And they're the ones that have actually now 11 patients that are suffering from retinitis pigmentosa. They're giving them vision, so it's pretty exciting. I told you the price has come down very little for this $2.1 million drug, which was the most expensive medicine in the world from Novartis for spinal muscular atrophy, which is a very difficult condition to cure. If your child has it, then you will probably be willing to pay whatever it is to solve this problem for your child. And this was the official price of Zolgensma, which was the name of the drug. And now, in just a matter of 1 year of them announcing that, there is a boy born in England who's using the Zolgensma drug, and they are spending essentially 1.8 million pounds, which is about the same price, and this drug is out and they've been cured, and this kid has been born with this disease and has actually gotten cured from it from gene therapy. And this article is from last month. Okay, so this is 2021. Now, we spoke about malaria being eradicated from the world by editing the DNA of the mosquitoes and then inserting something known as a gene drive, which is a self-replicating genetic sequence where in the offspring of the mosquito, the genetically engineered part will also manifest itself, will edit the DNA of the offspring also. Through just modifying the DNA of one generation, all future generations' DNA also gets modified, which is a very dangerous technology. It's known as the gene drive. And the US government was battling for years saying this technology is so dangerous that if you make a modification one time in one species, and if they have an offspring, eventually in the long run, all species will be the same modification, will have the same trait. Then they said, everybody said, no, we can't have mosquitoes genetically modified from this. We don't know the consequences of this. It can be so much danger can come from it. But then eventually, these people have agreed in America, in Florida, in Key Biscayne, Florida, which is a very beautiful area right off Miami, where they've released mosquitoes, which are the cause of Zika virus, chikungunya, dengue, and yellow fever. And they have now, as of 3 days, on 3rd May 2021, they have released the mosquitoes that are genetically modified with the gene drive in America. So now you cannot put this back. You cannot reverse this condition. Ho gaya. Now it's only a matter of time that these diseases will be completely eradicated from the whole world. They've also deployed these in Africa. And this year they plan on deploying these mosquitoes in all different parts of the world. So what we're doing is we're redesigning species, including our own. Maybe this COVID vaccine is also editing our DNA through the mRNA. I heard of a case where one person took the vaccine and went to the hospital 10 times through the course of a year or something since the vaccine got released. And the doctors could not figure out why this patient had COVID so many times that they had to come to the hospital. Eventually, they figured out that the mRNA vaccine for this particular individual mutated his DNA to produce the coronavirus. So his DNA was making the virus nonstop. So he kept getting sick throughout the year. So it's a pretty dangerous thing, messing around with the genome, and maybe it's a bioweapon, maybe it is not. But we know that the AstraZeneca vaccine actually injects a harmless bacteria who's edited harmless virus, where they've inserted one segment of the coronavirus within that virus, and that is supposed to stimulate the immune system to protect you. But sometimes it doesn't, and that's why this whole vaccine thing is a hot topic of debate. But genetic engineering can make these vaccines. So these vaccines are also being made by using CRISPR-Cas9 tools. So the funny thing is that I spoke about this a few years back, and programmable life forms means that we can make any living organism do certain things that we want them to do, and that's how a lot of our medicine in the world is made. Spider silk is made from genetically modifying the bacteria that produces the silk. But the history of genetic modification actually started way before you can even imagine it started. This is not new. This is not a 2020 phenomenon. This has been happening for generations. Our banana which we eat today should not be edible actually. हमारा जो banana है वो breeding के साथ over generations they've made it from a thick and big and not tasty banana to a sweet banana that human beings like to eat. So that is without gene editing, but through breeding, which is another form of genetic engineering. In the 1960s, scientists were putting radiation, which are nothing but frequencies, and those frequencies were essentially modifying randomly the plant's genetic code. And that led to the start of Monsanto and all these companies, where they realized they can actually manipulate the DNA sequence of plants and make them resistant to pesticides, resistant to whatever it is that is eating them, and also give them superpowers to make the fruit bigger, tastier, look better, have last longer shelf life. But in 1970s, they inserted the DNA into the cell and studied it. Then in 1974, the world's first genetically modified animal was created, the mouse. Then from 1970s till now, there have been so many systematic penetration of genetics in every industry, especially starting with the food. As you can see, our cheese over here now, the yeast of the cheese is basically made from editing the DNA. The chymosin gene was inserted into the plasmid, which essentially modifies the yeast cell, which produces the cheese faster and better. In 1994, our tomatoes, which we eat today, at least in America, they were suppressing the gene that makes it rot. So the tomatoes are bigger in America and Spain. You see all these amazing tomatoes in Italy, probably because they edited. And in India, you see all Marella tomatoes. But if you're starting to see the tomatoes that are really good, then it is probably genetically modified, So I would be wary of that. I wouldn't want to eat that myself, because when you consume that, it causes some epigenetic reaction in your body, which will essentially lower and weaken your immune system. Strawberries have already been inserted with the Arctic flounder fish DNA, which allows it to become resistant to cold, so they can freeze strawberries and then reuse them in food throughout the year. Even tomatoes that are cancer fighting, they have injected them with some gene editing thing where they have become purple tomatoes can help fight cancer. Funny thing is that rice is the third most used crop in the world. It's wheat, corn, and rice. 50% of the world's food on a daily basis is essentially made from rice. And if you can, there was a scientist in China that has been nominated for the Nobel Prize because he figured out a way to make rice that is the grain of rice is so thicker seed, and the height of the plant is as high and tall as a human being, where before it was only half the size apparently. and it's known as the golden rice. And this rice essentially is dangerous because now out of the food supply, they have already input this particular grain in more than 10% of the global food rice supply, and soon it will be more. So I say, my personal views, we should object to this, even though it might increase the profitability and yield for farmers. It is definitely harming humanity in the long run, consuming this, and then not having traditional rice available for those who want it. They've also created chickens that don't grow the feathers, naked chickens, bigger pigs, fish, the Arctic, the salmon that we are eating in the world today. There's high demand in sushi and in a lot of countries where fish is important. That they have now, I remember last year doing a presentation where I said that they would be giving, this is naked chicken. I'll just skip this slide. Yeah, the Aqua Advantage salmon. So this salmon is engineered basically to replace the traditional salmon. It grows bigger in the same conditions, so it gives more yield to all the fish farmers. And they said that they're going to announce they got approval, and this was in 2015. In 2019, they said they're going to try to launch it, okay, in Q4 of 2020, and then now 2021, okay, we are talking about 2 days back, they have started shipping the world's first genetically modified salmon to restaurants across USA. So America, if you have fish right now, it is genetically modified. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's already happening. You can also have children that have 3 parents, where you have a person where they modify the embryo to do that. I won't get into that right now. You can have glow-in-the-dark zebra fish. That is, for years, fish that glow in the dark genes have already been modified with the genes of fireflies. Now you have glow-in-the-dark cats. Maybe you can buy a pair soon. In America, the scientists have, if you've seen a documentary on Netflix, you've seen a lot of mice and monkeys and even cats and pets in these genetically engineered labs are glowing in the dark like this. So if you see in the lab, you can find the mouse glowing. So it's very close for a human being to do the same. If you can successfully do this in monkeys and animals, you can do this in human beings also. So you want to save your electricity bill in the night, put this DNA in yourself. The funny thing is, now our food for vegetarians who want to, or the non-veg people who want to become veg because of cholesterol issues or whatnot, can now eat Impossible burgers or Beyond Meat burger patties, which are made from plant sources that are genetically engineered from soy. And this is pretty interesting food that is already selling and it's become quite a trend. But India mein, I don't know if it chalega, because India mein, the veg people will not want to have a non-veg taste made from veg. But abhi wo ho raha hai. And even the future of brain-computer interface. So I've heard that there's this company, apart from Neuralink, there's another company called Profusa. Profusa is a company that the Department of Defense funded $7.5 million, and Bill Gates put in $7.5 million in that company. And that company essentially has engineered a biological crystal life form, because crystals are known to be like life on a quantum level, that this hydrogel can be inserted into a human being's circuitry and receive wireless transmissions or waves, because on a quantum level, we are nothing but vibrations and frequencies and waves. So it collects biometric data from your body and it transmits that to Internet of Things devices. And Profusa is essentially what is already an implemented technology, some conspiracy theorists say, in the COVID swabs that the government, when you're traveling, when they enforce you to use a COVID test inside the swabs itself, on the swab part, they put a fiber, which when it comes in contact with your body, it starts to grow like a crystal in your body, and it essentially grows towards the pineal gland or where the electromagnetic wave is. So it sounds dangerous, but then the fact that all these millions and millions of dollars are invested in these companies and these technologies are very real, it is not a stretch to assume that it could be already being used in us to make us essentially by microchipping us in the form of a biological chip, which doesn't feel like we've been chipped by some metallic object, So I don't know, maybe this has already happened, and we need to find ways to reverse this in human beings, because it takes away our freedom, and it raises questions about government control on the human population. But the future of brain-computer interface is going to be through genetic engineering. That's the future of this company, which Elon Musk has already launched. Aging, we could actually live younger. I feel there's some science that I'm researching in which is pointing to the fact that you can increase aging, which means that you can also potentially reverse it. I don't know, have any of you been to Mount Kailash Parbat? Can you just say in the comment chat, yes, anybody? Have you ever heard of Mount Kailash Parbat in India? In Tibet, actually. So this mountain is known to have very mystical properties, where people who go there, their nails grow faster, their hair grows faster. In a matter of 1 week, they start to become like a full-on sadhu, and their nails grow like 4 or 5 times the normal speed. And then there's a story that when you climb the mountain, it is 2,000 meters shorter than the Mount Everest, but nobody on earth has climbed Mount Kailash Parbat because of the electromagnetic force that is over there, or some unexplained invisible force or energy is over there. And it's also known to be the birthplace of Shiva, and in multiple cultures a very sacred mountain. There were a group of 27-year-old men that were climbing the mountain and attempting to climb it. And there was a point where, when they reached that point, by taking just 100 steps, they aged 50 years. In 100 steps of them walking, these 27-year-old kids became 65 years old with beards and stuff. And this is apparently a well-documented story over there. And that gives you, like, if the energy going into the cells can be magnetized, there are research showing that it can actually heal you faster from wounds. It can heal you faster from all sorts of conditions in the body that require that electromagnetic field. So this is coming. Google has invested $500 million in this company. He's one of the scientists that works on it. You can watch these documentaries on YouTube. Maybe COVID might allow us to, COVID might edit our DNA as a species over time, who knows? But at least we will live longer, if that helps. We might live for 500 years. This is very, very likely to happen. Looking at the rate at which genetic engineering is being implemented in food and in human beings already, I don't think this is a faraway stretch. China is obviously leading this whole field. In 2018, they edited the human babies over there, human patients with gene editing. They try to cure leukemia with it. FDA approved leukemia therapy also, which is a cancer. And I don't want to take up more time, so I'll skip this stuff. But basically, the future of your food is going to look like this, probably, the diet. And Nestle in Japan is basically resorted to DNA testing and then personalizing food via that. Even what's interesting is that you can match your partner. So this is a new technology. I feel like this thing of matching couples based on their genetics is likely to come out in the future, although it'll be very controversial. But what they say is, when you marry somebody and have kids with them from the same religion, these diseases happen to you. So 5% of diseases can be prevented by just having diversity in the person you choose to marry your child to. So if you've not seen this photo, it's pretty interesting. You can select your baby tomorrow. I think this day will come where you can say, I want to hire a more intelligent 20/20 vision, edit the DNA in them, and this kid can be yours. This scientist was the first guy who started the revolution. A little bit of history for you. He also was told not to in 2019 to edit the gene of 2 Chinese kids, but he did it. And he basically caused these they're living in China right now and they have HIV resistance to them. And then they cloned 5 baby monkeys after editing their genes to study them in China. And they did this using CRISPR-Cas9. But now the rate of using this technology has improved 100-fold with RLR technology, which is a new technology that has come out, which might even increase the rate of genetic engineering much more. So yeah, I don't know if we have more time. Stan, do we have more time?
No, we need to wind up, Milind.
Okay, fine. So I'll just leave you anyway. So this guy is now missing in China. This doctor, maybe someone has some government has agency has taken him under. But yeah, that is the current state of world affairs today. And genetics is the main driving technology of everything. Really, in COVID, even the testing of COVID is PCR based. Even the vaccines are genetically engineered. Even the potential biometric chipping of human beings is also going to happen through this. So we might be living in a world that is completely influenced by genetics. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Milind. I think what we really trying to understand here is that the world of genetics, jo hai, it will actually impact every sphere of our living. Yeah, whether it is food, nutrigenomics ki hum log 4 saal se baat kar hi rahe hain. Very soon, as Dr. Nikhil said, फार्माकोलॉजिकली अभी डॉक्टर अभी इतने ज्यादा रूटीन प्रैक्टिस में नहीं करते हैं, बट इट इज इनएविटेबल दैट अगले 3-4-5 साल के बाद में फार्माकोजेनोमिक्स भी काफी प्रिवेलेंट हो जाएगा. एंड एक्चुअली कोविड हैज एक्चुअली टोल्ड अस कि वो करना जरूरी क्यों है. एंड ऑफ कोर्स यू विल सी इंजीनियरिंग, यू विल सी आवर एजुकेशन, यू विल सी स्पोर्ट्स, you will see anything and everything, your beauty, anti-aging, and everything will come based on genetics. And even today, not just the food grain manufacturers, but even people who are into anti-aging industry, cosmetics, etc., they're making even the food supplements are genetically designed based on your genotype or your phenotype. So to explain what's happening in the world of genetics, to understand a larger picture, Milind, you have put together a lot of slides, and as usual you're throwing a light on these subjects with so much of ease and with the latest updates. मतलब 2 दिन के पहले का भी update अगर हम लोग देते हैं, that's exactly what the justification of sustained accreditation of genomic education. Dr. Nikhil himself told that कि वो जब MBBS पढ़ते थे, genetics was one section, and nutrition तो doctors भी पढ़ते नहीं है, तो people are a little reluctant to acknowledge nutrition is vital to our well-being. But of course, now things are changing. Doctors are getting more and more relevant. So that's how we do it. So we now, with this session, we come to the end of the first day. Let's all put our hands together and acknowledge, Milind Doshi for his wonderful information for the last 4 years, and especially in this SAGE, which we have done in the lockdown. In every SAGE, he has been giving us a lot of vital, crucial information. And our resolve at Velocity Genetics and at Vignet to propagate more and more education about genetics to ordinary people, health conscious individuals and families is getting stronger and stronger day by day. You will see a lot more exciting things that are happening in the field of genetics with Velocity Genetics, different products that we are conceptualizing, and we will be going to people and then requesting them to understand for their own health, the health of their family, and also to the society through a contribution. So you are very special people because we can represent a lot of different products ranges, but I think genetics is going to be the big next trend, and it's already showing up signs, and we are the early movers. Early movers के लिए काफी resistance आता है. You need to have that tenacity, you need to have that perseverance, and you need to have that patience to understand this subject, implement that subject in your own life, and then be a role model to others and influence people and explaining what it is. So thank you, Milind, once again. And I really thank each and every one of you for being so patient. It's not easy to sit at a stretch for 3.5 hours. We are like 3.5 hours right now. So that's the end of day 1. आप सभी लोगों के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Today evening, we are going to have a session, all the Velocity Booster IBOs. I want to tell you that we are going to have a session of alkaline water and the significance of alkaline water. There's going to be a demo of Budar ionized alkaline water at 8 o'clock by Mr. Bhupesh Kurana. So you all can bring in your guest and you can attend and also get a better understanding of this product. And tomorrow, the day 2 will start at 2 o'clock. We have Reena Baliga, our nutrigenomic counselor, and she's also the in charge of a certificate course of nutrigenomics, talking about alkaline water and the science behind it. So we'll also try to understand the science behind it. Yes, session को आप miss ना करें, because with renewed information हम लोग इस session को attend करेंगे. And we also would have another session by Lavina Cardoza. We also have Shruti Kulkarni talking about another very interesting topic. And we also will have Dr. Amol Raut also talking about the genetics from a medical perspective. So all 4 sessions, cracking sessions, loads of information. तो उसको miss नहीं कर लीजिएगा. Please log in today evening at 8 o'clock for a demonstration by Bhupesh Khurana, and tomorrow 10 o'clock for the second session. And you will feel that that's a time better invested. So with this, I close. Thank you very much. See you all. Thank you so much. Just be standing a little, stretch yourself, wave your hands, and pat your back for your marathon sitting and listening to this subject. Eat well, take some good rest, and I'll see you at 8 o'clock for the session at Velocity Booster. And see you at 10 o'clock or 9:55 tomorrow for the day 2 for another very informative, insightful, cracking sessions. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Recording stopped.